In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and video media online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We take life back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929 when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthy published a short story entitled Chains. Two of the story's main characters speculate that any two living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries. The man bites dog aspect of Karinthy's conjecture is that almost any two people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative. Yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank.
And lobbyists make the rich even richer.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Thursday. We've got a lot to cover today. In just a moment, Congressman Khanna will be with us for the entire hour taking your calls in a progressive town hall meeting. If you want to get in the queue, it's 202-808-9925. In our second hour, I want to dig into the Second Amendment scam, this dangerous scam well, I'll fill you in when we get to the second hour today, but also a new weapon on the Sig Sauer is introducing that is twice as powerful as the AR-15. It'll penetrate all known body armor, and they're going to be selling them into the U.S. market starting, well, actually, they've already started. They've sold about 5,000 of them. Also, is there a flood of evangelicals leaving the right and becoming more progressive because of Trump? We'll get into that in the second hour. And what do you do if an election-denying Trump supporter shows up on your doorstep? This is happening all over the country right now. We'll get into that in the second hour. In our third hour, Amanda Milkovits will be with us, the growing signs of white nationalist recruitment. These racist groups are popping up all over the country, and they are aggressively recruiting young people in particular. And our geeky science. Will we all be living without monarch butterflies soon? This is troubling. But we start out with Congressman Khanna. He represents the 17th District of California. He's vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at RepRoKhanna, ROKHANNA. And Congressman Khanna, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So
appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, and thank you for doing this. So, President Biden this week didn't quite declare a climate emergency, but he did talk about, he put forward some executive orders that seemed of some consequence. I'm curious your thoughts on that. And then you've got this CHIPS legislation that Bernie actually dropped by either last Friday or Monday, I forget which, but a couple of days ago, and weighed in on. So, your thoughts on those things?
Yeah. So I just saw Senator Markey this morning, who was with the president, and the good news is the president put climate and emergency, I think, in the same sentence, and now he's just got to go one step further and declare a climate emergency. The executive actions that he has taken are strong. I mean, they increase the EPA's ability to regulate. But what a climate emergency would do is actually allow him to transfer funds to be able to invest in solar and wind and heating pumps and other renewable energy. I mean, remember what Trump did when he declared a border emergency. He was able to actually use funds for the border. And it would also give him the ability to deny permitting for new fossil fuel projects on federal land that are going to cause a great CO2 emission. So I believe maybe he's going to give another month or so in hopes that the inflation numbers will come down and still there could be some climate deal. But eventually I'm pretty confident he is going to declare the climate emergency. On the CHIPS bill, I fundamentally believe we have to reindustrialize this country. We've got to bring production back. We've got to get jobs. But I agree with Senator Sanders' point that you can't just have a blank check to these semiconductor companies. And one of the things that we're working on as a progressive caucus is to pass this, but to make sure that the money can't go into stock buybacks, that the money actually has to go into production in the United States, building the factories here in the United States.
Yeah, well, it seems like a great first step. Is there anything else you want to flag for folks before we get started, or you want to start picking up phone calls here?
Well, we go to phone calls.
I
think those are the two key issues.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Brad in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. You are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yes, Representative Khanna. I'd like to ask you, and I'm going, just let me pull over because I have an earpiece, but my truck is loud. I'm not your normal truck driver, but what I want to ask is why isn't the Democratic Party messaging that if this country becomes authoritarianism, it will be like a psychological and physical pyramid scheme where everyone but the very top will be in servitude to someone above them.
Look, I think you get at the key point that is driving so much of the anger and anxiety in the country. Let me give you two specific examples. Wall Street is buying up housing across the country, and they're basically jacking up the rents. Americans aren't supposed to be have landlords of Wall Street where we're paying all these high rents. I mean, people are supposed to be able to, in their own communities, have housing or own a house or have reasonable rents. And that's an example of what you're talking about. And the second point is that, the middle class in this country has lost 25% of wealth since 1980, 25%. The top 10% has 72% of the wealth in this country. The bottom 50% has 2% of the wealth in this country. That's not sustainable. You can't have a democracy of equality with that kind of stark economic disparity. So this is a choice that we made. I mean, there are policies on unionization, on minimum wage, on banning the financialization of housing that could fix this.
Cliff in Parma, Ohio. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Good morning, gentlemen. I want to take the time to thank Congressman Khanna and the Democrats for the rescue plan and helping small people like me. I'm a retired senior living on a partial Social Security and pension, and thanks to the Democrats, they added money to my food stamps, which really comes in handy. They added money to my HEAP account, which helps pay for my energy. They lowered the cost of my internet with the EBB legislation. Of course, the child tax credit, that expired, But they also helped my union pension fund, and that's the reason I'm calling. The question is simple: How long will this bailout help them, and how long will they be sustainable? To where I can count on that money coming every month. Thank you, guys. I'll listen off air. Offline.
Well, thank you for that call. We ought to put you on CNN and MSNBC. That's the most effective call in terms of what we've done. And I say this: we should not be apologetic for the American Rescue Plan. I would cast the same exact vote today. Cast the same exact vote because people were hurting back then. They needed an increase in food stamps. They needed an increase in that stimulus check to make ends meet and not get evicted or thrown out of their house. They needed the support. The cities needed the support. And I'm glad that you personalized it because I'm very proud of what we did in that bill, and I'm proud of what we did to secure the pensions. My understanding is that has secured the pensions for the next decade, but I will check so I'm getting you the accurate information and follow up if that's not correct. But my understanding is it secured those pensions that we helped for the next decade.
That's great news. Les, Winnemucca, Nevada, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hey, thank you for taking my call, and thank you, Representative, for taking time to do this. It's a good public service you're doing. All I wanted to say was we got north and south running mountain ranges here in Nevada, and every one of them have got wind funnels, basically, where it's just windy all the time. And every one of them natural places for wind farms. We have massive solar ability. What's to stop the state of Nevada from going into the power production business as a state and selling the power to NV Energy?
Well, I think that if you're talking about what's stopping these states from going into production themselves, you raise a very good point. I mean, there's the community choice energy programs, which allow municipalities to produce their own energy. And I think we ought to allow the states also to produce their own energy. The Tennessee Valley Authority is a great model, and that creates more competition and more sources of energy. And where you've had municipal energy sources, it's been cheaper and more renewable than many of the utilities. So I support policies to get states and municipalities producing energy.
Congressman Khanna is with us for the hour in a National Progressive Town Hall meeting. He's vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives. Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at RepRo, as in R-O, RepRo Khanna. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Oh, if I said 15th District, I meant 17th District of California. We'll be right back with your calls for Congressman Khanna. And welcome back. Mark in Sacramento, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Good morning, gentlemen. I've been very disillusioned with the corruption of the previous administration, and I wanted to ask the congressman if there's any way we could get some kind of legislation that would require 5 or 10 years of tax returns for presidential candidates. I think that might be an easy way to maybe reduce the level of corruption of, say, President Trump.
Filter out the grifters.
Jim, you're absolutely right that we should have a requirement to do it. And the Democrats have proposed this over and over again, and the Republicans refuse to pass it. What I don't understand is why a Mitch McConnell, who clearly doesn't want Trump to return, doesn't just pass this in the Senate. I mean, it would be one of the easier ways to discourage Trump from running is just require basic disclosures, which every presidential candidate does. I mean, presidential candidates at 1% in the polls go through the root canal of having to put all their financial records out there, and that's because you're going to be a leader of the free world. There has to be a level of disclosure, and so. But we don't have any Republican support for it, and that's what makes it so frustrating. We can pass it through the House, and we have, but we can't get it passed through the Senate.
Alfredo in Houston, Texas. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I have a question regarding money in politics and the fact that about 30 to 40% of the electorate doesn't vote. So what is there as for our legislation that can be passed that maybe if somebody is registered to vote and does vote, can maybe get like a $300 or $400 voucher or even $200 just to increase the electorate?
Well, Fredo, you raise a good point, that it's not just about voter suppression that is taking place or kicking people out off the rolls. It's also, unfortunately, about voter apathy and how do we inspire and motivate people to vote. I think what we have to do is two things. One, we've got to make it easier to vote, give people a holiday on Election Day so you don't have to go drop the kids off to school and work and figure out how to do your errands, that you can actually focus and find time to vote. And the second thing is we've got to deliver on change. I mean, people have to feel that their life has gotten better. That's why Cliff's call earlier was a real moving call where he said, okay, here's how my life got better with what Congress did. I got a bit more money for paying my rent, and I've got my pensions are secure, and I've got food stamps. We've got to deliver so that people feel, okay, it's worth my voting.
Yeah. Congressman, we just have 35 seconds here until the break. Do you see anything, any consequential pushback against the voter suppression that you just mentioned? I know that there's talk about reforming the presidential the bill from 1887, that the Electoral Count Act.
Well, the Electoral Count Act, I think, Tom, has to be reformed so that states can't just have the state legislatures send a slate of delegates in, even if a candidate has lost the popular vote. But in terms of voting rights, I mean, that was H.R. 1 that would have empowered that. That has passed the House. And until we have a filibuster, that's not going to pass the Senate. But I think we have got to make every effort, at least in the lame duck, to get that passed.
Yeah, amen. Congressman Khanna with us for the hour, taking your calls. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna. You can find his website at khanna.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepRoKhanna. Stick around. We'll be back in 60 seconds. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back during World War I under President Wilson, we had a windfall profits tax on war profiteers, essentially, of 95% above their normal profits. You were allowed to make your normal profits, but when you started making more than that, 95% tax on that income. President Franklin Roosevelt revisited the exact same thing, windfall profits tax, during World War II, saying he didn't want this war to produce any new war millionaires. During the Korean War, Dwight Eisenhower had a windfall profits tax. During the echo of the fall of the Shah of Iran, when all the Iranian oil was taken off the marketplace and the price spiked, President Ronald Reagan imposed a windfall profits tax on the oil and gas industry to stop exploitation of that. Now we have Senator Bernie Sanders in the Senate and Ed Markey as well, along with him, and Representative Jamal Bowman in the House saying, let's do the same thing now. There's a whole video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Congressman Khanna, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your calls for the hour. Bill in Sierra Blanca, Texas. Bill, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Thanks, Tom. Representative Khanna, I have great respect for your work, but I want your thoughts on this, Congressman. You know, as you know, President Biden went to Saudi Arabia, and we all know that he's trying to get more oil, and unfortunately, that's what the American people want. It's critical to getting him reelected, or I guess for the midterms, I'm sure. However, don't you think that it would have been better for President Biden to go to Iran that has vast quantities of oil that could be released instead of Saudi Arabia, where he got bolstered and slammed. Now we have China going to form an alliance for drones in Iran. So what do you think?
Well, but look, I was opposed to him going and meeting MBS. Senator Sanders and I, as some of the listeners will know, have led the effort to stop the Saudi brutal war in Yemen. MBS is most responsible for that war. He's most responsible for the killing of Khashoggi. There's no reason he should have met. The Saudis are playing us. It's not like they're increasing suddenly production. There are other things we can do to lower oil prices, starting with stopping the export of our oil, which we didn't do before 2015. We can exempt European allies, but there's no reason to be exporting our gasoline and oil around the world right now. And second, we could be buying the oil at the dips like now and then selling it back to the American public at a lower price to put downward pressure. That's what the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is. So I don't think this trip is going to succeed in getting Saudi Arabia to do anything. And unfortunately, I think it compromised some of our leverage, where President Biden had said he was going to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state and end the war in Yemen, and it's given away some of our leverage.
Tom, in Martinsburg, West Virginia, you are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, I'm going to retire in February, or actually I turned 72 in February, okay? And I guess I'm supposed to start disbursing my 401k when I turn 72. Well, given the downturn in the market, there's not going to be much left to disburse. So is there any way to raise the age level of disbursement of 401k 75 instead of 72? And I'll hang up.
That's a great point. You know, that's why I come on the show. Every now and then you get these listeners with brilliant ideas. I hear you, because I understand that, you don't want to be dispersing it in a downturn of the market. And, I'm hoping we don't have a recession and the inflation comes down, but it's a volatile time. I'm going to have my team look into this and see if there's anything we can do. And there should be some allowance, it seems to me, when they're for economic conditions.
Gretchen in Salem, Virginia, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yeah, hi, Representative Khanna. I'm a physician, and I just heard today on Stephanie Miller that Biden is on Paxlovid, L-O-I-D, and I didn't know what Paxlovid was. I don't think that's the same as Paxlovid. Did the Senate cut 9.2 million doses of Paxlovid after March 17, 2022, and what's the difference?
Gretchen, I'm not a doctor, and I don't know. I will look into that. My understanding is that the president is on the drug that is effective for people who are higher risk, which he is just based on his age, in making sure that COVID doesn't do significant damage. I don't know the difference between those drugs, but I can try to find out and make sure that my view is we should obviously be funding this in the Senate and the House.
Pat in Anderson, California. Pat, we have just 1 minute to a hard break here. Can you make your question really quick, please?
Yeah, I'll make it short. My problem is with medical suppliers. My son just went to the lab, and they said, well, that'll be $500 up front. And I want to have representatives' opinion of why we don't have some idea what something's going to cost. When you go to Walmart or Safeway, you know what it's going to cost. You go to the lab or you go to the hospital, and then you get the big surprise later. So what is his opinion on this?
Well, it's wrong. The House passed again, and it hasn't passed the Senate to stop the practice of surprise medical billing. But more than that, there are two things we ought to do. One is we ought to cancel medical debt in this country. The idea that you could have an operation or need to go to the emergency room and then people go into debt and debt for their whole life, that ought to be canceled. It's about $290 billion, the total medical debt, and I'm actually working with Senator Sanders on a bill to cancel that. And then we need to make sure that we don't have these high deductibles and copays. I mean, that's why we need Medicare for all.
Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for the hour, taking your calls in a National Progressive Town Hall meeting. He represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House. He's vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We'll be back on the other side of this break with more of your calls for Congressman Ro Khanna. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Khanna.house.gov, KHANNA.house.gov, and RepRoKhanna over on Twitter. Our book today is Future War, Preparing for the New Global Battlefield by Robert, I believe it's pronounced Latif, L-A-T-I-F-F. This is from the introduction. On a sweltering August day following weeks of heightened tension with Russia over its actions in Ukraine and Syria, and harsh words between the United States and China over actions in the South China Sea, and as workers are preparing to depart the cool of their air-conditioned Manhattan office buildings for the gridlocked highways and subways, several large electric power plants along the East Coast simultaneously experienced dramatic overspeed conditions in their large turbine generators. Plant operators are unable to stop the steam turbines, whose automatic control and data systems have been infected by sophisticated computer malware, and they catastrophically tear themselves apart, cutting power to large segments of the population and industries in the Northeast. Building systems shut down, hospitals switch to emergency generators, trains stop running, traffic lights cease operating, and Wall Street trading comes to a halt. At the same time, 1,100 miles to the south, a massive rocket sits fueled and ready to launch a critical national security satellite when an explosive-laden private aircraft flies at low altitude into the Cape Canaveral launch pad area and, despite repeated warnings, slams into the pressurized fuel tank and solid rocket motors, creating an enormous conflagration. Half a world away, elite commandos equipped with the latest high-technology equipment but unidentifiable as a national army attack U.S. and allied interests near areas of disputed territory. Thus are fired the opening shots of a new war. These hypothetical events represent a radically different style of conflict fought with new tools and against new and unfamiliar enemies. When most people think of war, they imagine soldiers doing battle with other soldiers, employing tanks, artillery, and other recognizable weapons. However, in this century, war has morphed into something we can scarcely recognize, and future conflicts will be qualitatively and quantitatively unlike those of the past. They will be fought using innovative and unusual weapons, many of which, because the technologies have both civilian and military uses, will be available to far more people who are far less skilled in their employment. The so-called democratization of technology has diminished the monopoly of advanced countries on the tools of war. 21st century armed conflicts often have no battlefield in the traditional sense. The concept of opposing armies clashing in deadly struggle but moderated by international conventions of behavior seems a thing of the past. In 1999, Chinese colonels Kuo Liang and Wang Shuangshui predicted that soldiers would increasingly be computer hackers, financiers, drug smugglers, and agents of private corporations rather than members of a military, and that their weapons would include not only airplanes, cannons, poison gas bombs, and biochemical agents, but also computer viruses, net browsers, and financial derivative tools. Their predictions were prescient. Yesterday's wars were, like World War II, about saving civilized nations from maniacal dictators, or like the conflicts in Vietnam and Korea, devoted to a clash of ideologies in the attempt to limit the spread of one hegemon over another. They were big affairs involving large military forces and enormous violence. Today's wars are more about cultural and religious hatreds, using violence as a means to change the hearts and minds of people, among whom the killing occurs with more frequency. Tomorrow's wars will be different still, fought largely for political dominance with stealth and cunning, targeting innocents and institutions, heavily dependent on information superiority, and employing strange new weapons. While we have a highly motivated and well-trained and equipped armed forces that will adapt, we are not prepared as a nation to react well to the inevitably messy and ambiguous situations these new conflicts and weapons will present. We still have no clear idea of what constitutes an act of war in cyberspace now, nor of how we might respond to such an act. It is not enough for the military to be prepared.
Neither the public nor its decision makers have yet fully comprehended the significance of the changes in the types of conflict and the tools with which they will be fought. Without question, there will be circumstances when decision makers will find it necessary, or at least think it necessary, to send soldiers into classic boots-on-the-ground combat situations. We will continue to project force with our powerful aircraft, our munitions, and our aircraft carrier strike groups. When war is fought in foreign lands, it could well be against other high-tech armies. However, war will increasingly be more personal and often fought closer to home. It will not lend itself to the traditional massive displays of U.S. firepower. It will affect individuals directly, not as some distant conflict we read about in newspapers or watch in the movies or on the internet. Americans will be targeted on U.S. soil, often, as we have seen in San Bernardino and Orlando, by homegrown terrorists. This form of war will be messy and complex, and it will not lend itself to easy, quick, soundbite solutions. It may not even be clear for a while who perpetrated the violence against us. Was it state-sponsored or a random act of terror? Will we unleash massive destruction on foreign countries in retaliation for attacks by terrorists residing on our own soil? If so, to what end and with what consequences? There are always consequences, whether they be the death or capture of our own troops, unnecessary civilian casualties, or the incitement of more violence. The book Future War by Robert Latif. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at ThomHartmann.com if you want to really support our program. And welcome back. Congressman Khanna taking your calls for the hour. Deborah in Dudley, Massachusetts. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Oh, hi, Representative Khanna. I wanted to know what part of Congress oversees the SSI program. I visited my sister who has mental deficits. She had no money, and I got her on the program, and she couldn't remember the way it was supposed to work. The way it works is you can't have more than $2,000 in resources in your money in your bank or whatever. And she broke, her car got wrecked, and she just started saving the money. And then when they reassessed her, because she had more than $2,000, she has to pay every penny back of any month that she had over $2,000 in resources, which includes the money that she spent to take care of herself. And it just seems wrong that they don't have any accommodation for mental deficits. There's no policy for evaluation of that. She just has to pay it all back, which means she's going to be penniless. And I just want to do something about it because I think the policy is wrong. I've been helping her get on Medicare. She had a pension which was small. It got spent. And then when I reconnected with her, she had maybe $1,000 left. She had no money. So I got her on SSI, and then she just didn't remember what she was supposed to do and spend all the money. Like, she had to spend every penny every month. And if you have over $2,000, like she had $1,950 in her that she had saved up, and then she kept going over because she was trying to save to buy a car, and then they reassessed.
Let's get Congressman Khanna's response, Deborah. Thank you.
Well, Deborah, thank you for sharing that about your sister. The Social Security Commissioner has jurisdiction over it, but there is a bill that Jamal Bowman, a colleague of mine from New York, has introduced that would fix this, that would say you should be able to save more than $2,000, that would increase the SSI that people can get and make it actually livable, and so that people can save, and also makes it so that folks can work, and then if they need to go back on SSI, that they're not being penalized, and recognizes the flexibility that people often need.
Patrick in East Lansing, Michigan. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Oh, hi, Representative Khanna. I so appreciate what you've been doing on so many fronts, and I wanted to ask you about Senator Manchin saying he won't vote for the global tax deal that would raise $200 billion for the United States budget. And the reason I'm calling is I'm really having trouble understanding what's going on here, because I don't see how you can have a democracy if you don't have tax sovereignty. And if global corporations have these tax havens, it takes away our ability to tax them fairly. But the New York Times covered Manchin telling the Biden administration they weren't going to go along after apparently he gave his word a year ago. And Janet Yellen, both at Treasury and the Fed, has apparently gotten 130 countries to agree to this. And what I don't understand is that if we don't go along, and I agree with the Biden administration saying full steam ahead, we'll let the other countries do it, our companies will be hurt by that because they'll face penalties wherever they have a subsidiary. So why would we give up the $200 billion instead of just raising the tax rate to 15% from 10.5%? And now Google and Amazon are saying they're worse off if we have to pull out because we can't get Manchin, and then they get penalized all over the EU.
Well, you understand the issue perfectly, and there should be a minimum tax that these companies pay. I mean, the reason for the legislation is that some of these companies were paying zero tax through all these loopholes and shelters. And the interesting thing is that raising taxes on anyone, but certainly on the wealthy and corporations in a recession, in an inflationary environment, is actually good because it's taking money out of the money supply. And this is just economics 101, that in a recession you wouldn't want to raise taxes. In inflation you would. And so anyone like Senator Manchin who's concerned about inflation should be for these tax increases, and it's frustrating that we aren't able to get that done.
Bill in Sarasota, Florida, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Oh, hi, Tom, and hi, Congressman Khanna. Unfortunately, Joe Biden's Build Back Better bill didn't pass, and I heard it had a lot of very good anti-inflationary measures within it. And I was wanting to know what those measures were, because I don't think the media communicated them well at all.
Well, first of all, they would have increased the taxes on the very wealthy. That means that won't be an asset bubble, that people would be spending on stocks or other investments, and that would have been deflationary. It would have reduced the cost of child care. It would have reduced the cost of prescription drugs. We're hopeful we can still do that. It would have reduced the cost of health care. It would have reduced the cost of rent and housing. So the inflation is just a fancy word for cost of living. People have been struggling with cost of living increases well beyond this inflation. And Build Back Better was designed principally to reduce cost of living for the working and middle class.
Patrick in Chicago, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, Representative. Thanks for doing this. My main question is when COVID-19 hit, the medical community stood up, answered the call, and went to work without ever doubting what they were doing and whether it was right. Why can we not forgive the student loans for all the medical people who have done everything they can to protect the people of this country and have just been left behind?
Eric, it's a great point. We should, not just for the doctors and the nurses, but probably across the board for everyone in the medical profession. But I've come out for giving student loans more broadly, up to $50,000 for working and middle-class Americans. I don't know any other major country in the world that has people graduate with $30,000, $40,000 of debt. Many of the people who are taking out these loans are the first in their family to go to college. So this idea that this is going to help the affluent is just not true. It's actually going to help a lot of people in the working class, and we should do it for vocational education as well. So it's not just focused on those who go to college. It's something that the president has the power to do.
Michael in Bronx, New York, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, gentlemen. How are you? Here's an interesting question. Now, considering the hearings that's coming up this evening, I think it's day 8 of it, I remember what Ms. Cheney and Benny Thompson said, that this remains an ongoing investigation. And I'm seeing a pattern that they're showcasing, the pattern of Trump's behavior leading up to January 6th. And it keeps going back and back and back to this pattern of inciting violence and just insulting people in a racist, sexist manner. I'm wondering, and I have a suspicion, that it's going to take it as far back as when he first got into office, when he said, well, when it comes to re-election, if there are no illegal votes, I win. If I don't win, that means someone voted illegally. He had the same...
So what's your question, Michael?
So the question is, could this go as far back as the 2016 election, a possibly show of Russia meddling.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Well, I think Donald Trump had a view that he should win by hook or crook and that the rules don't matter and that he was going to do everything possible to win. And that was 2016 and 2020. And if he didn't win, he wanted to cast doubt on the process itself. And for me, January 6th, the most damaging parts of what they've laid out is not just the insurrection and the invasion of the Capitol, but the systematic effort by the Justice Department to try to overturn the results of the election.
Cheryl in Studio City, California. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, thank you. As ever, I appreciate that you do this. Respectfully, Representative Khanna, you answered the question earlier, and I have yet to hear really any of Tom's guests answer this question, so I'm going to phrase it differently. What is preventing the Democratic representation up to the president from acknowledging and understanding that you have a messaging problem, you do not do it effectively, and what is preventing you from finding someone, much like they did with the 1-6 committee, because I think they're actually doing whoever they've got to help them with the messaging there, it seems to be relatively effective. What is preventing you from acknowledging you have one and doing something about it? I can't listen to more people call into these shows for decades and say the Democrats don't message well. So what is stopping you from acknowledging that you have that problem?
Sure, I think that people recognize that we have the problem, and the challenge is that the messaging starts from the White House. When you have the White House, you know, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton were brilliant messengers. I have a lot of respect for President Biden, but I just think they have to be more aggressive in talking about the economics, talking about what we've done to improve people's lives, talking about all of the record. And for whatever reason, we're not as good at doing that, and we need to be more aggressive.
Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for the hour, taking your phone calls in a National Progressive Town Hall meeting. He's vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House. And we will be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna in just a moment. You can find his website at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And you can tweet him at Rep. Ro Khanna, as in Representative Ro Khanna, Rep. Ro Khanna. And welcome back. Melba in New York City. Melba, you are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you, Tom, for your deliveries, and Congressman O'Connor. I'm in New York, but these affect everyone who receives Social Security. I receive a lot of letters from organizations asking for money and saying that the Social Security will end at 2029. And I'm very worried for all the people right now. People live longer than 50 or 30 years ago. What is the status of the Social Security program?
Well, the status is one that needs help, and the Democrats want to do that by increasing the taxes on those who make over $250,000 and putting that into Social Security. And that would do two things. That would make sure that it's solvent for the foreseeable future, certainly the next 30 years, and it will also increase the benefits. But it's the Republicans who want to cut it, and that's one of the big issues at stake in this election. I mean, are we going to give the Republicans control who want to try to cut Social Security, privatize it, or have Democrats who want to shore it up and increase it?
Morris in Long Beach, California. You are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Congressman, I know you and the other House, but does Chucky have a plan to deal with the obstructionists in his own party? I'm sorry, Mr. Schumer, Chuck Schumer. Does he have a plan to deal with the obstructionists in his own party? I'm talking about Manchin, and I'm talking about Sinema. Now, the Grim Reaper, he don't have a D in front of his name, so we don't expect nothing from him. But Manchin's got a D in front of his name, and so does Sinema. Does Chuck Schumer have a plan to address the obstructionists in his own party? Otherwise, we can't go nowhere. But thank you for this time, and good morning, time. Bye-bye.
Well, look, I think Senator Schumer has been trying. He's been sitting down trying to get a deal with Senator Manchin, and the reality is that it hasn't gone anywhere, and this is why we're saying we need more than a 50-50 Senate to get these things done. I mean, it's really been two senators that have prevented a lot of the president's agenda from going through, and the Republicans. But I believe that Senator Schumer is going to continue to try, and the hope now is that if the inflation numbers come down, which they will in August, the August report, that we can get something done on climate.
Ed in Chicago, just a minute to the break. Ed, you got a quick question?
Yeah, is there a talking point czar for the Democratic Party? When a Democratic representative comes up with a great point, it disappears. Compared to when a Republican representative comes up with a great point, the entire party jumps on it like a dog with a bone. Don't you guys get a list every day of possible talking points from your colleagues that would make great talking points?
Ed, we do get them from the White House and the Speaker. The Republicans, of course, have a much bigger media chamber and an echo chamber, and we've talked about this a number of times. They've invested in talk radio. They've invested more in cable networks, in bloggers, in a echo chamber on Facebook. But, we need a more coordinated response and punchy. It doesn't just have to come from the top, more of a grassroots ability to have the message. And two, we need to have more infrastructure to amplify it.
Congressman Khanna taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna in just a moment. You can find his website at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepRoKhanna. We'll be right back. It's 49 minutes past the hour. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. Welcome back. Congressman Khanna taking your calls for the hour. Diane in St. Paul, Minnesota. You are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hello, and thank you for taking my call. I am very concerned with what seems to be pandering to the religious right for the Supreme Court. What can be done to secure the separation of church and state?
Well, we need to continue to pass legislation in Congress that makes that clear. I mean, the Supreme Court has been eviscerating it, allowing for school prayer, allowing for religious speech in school settings. And so Congress, I think, needs to step up and say there are certain things that are coercive speech and push back. I mean, one of the things we need with an expansionist Supreme Court in terms of an active Supreme Court is for Congress and the executive branch to push back in the other direction.
You know, the IRS has not meaningfully enforced the nonprofit law against, or the IRS rules against nonprofits engaging in political activity, basically since the Reagan administration. Any way to push that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be making sure that the institutions aren't engaged in political speech. And there's a line. I mean, look, we can welcome people who have a faith and should to participate in the political process. I think what people don't want is the coercion. They don't want in the public's face in schools and in public institutions to be coerced under a certain faith, because the whole point is to have multiple faiths in this country.
Elizabeth in Miami, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Thank you so much. Representative Khanna, I really appreciate you. I'm 75 years old. My career was in federal government as a clinical and medical researcher. I have Parkinson's disease, diagnosed in 18, but probably had it for 15 years prior. I could not tolerate Cinemed, which Medicare would pay for. As a researcher, I found better treatment through natural sources. My L-Dopa comes from the bean, a seed of a bean. 98% gets past my blood-gut barrier, my blood-brain barrier and into my partisan factor where it belongs. I now am complicated by long COVID with excruciating symptoms. I'm trying to participate in the Recover program. There's not one in Miami available yet. I have not slept in 38 days. Saved my life since December 13 when it hit me.
So, Elizabeth, is your question why doesn't Medicare pay for these natural treatments?
Why does Medicare not pay for alternative medication when we have so many different types of medicine people in the country?
Thank you.
Well, Elizabeth, I admire your resilience, admire your dealing with Parkinson, and your speech is incredibly clear. So whatever you're doing is working. Look, I'm open to making sure that we are covering a wide variety of medicines. I just want to make sure that we're not covering the quacks and the types of things that are making a profit exploiting people. But as long as there's some baseline. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As long as there's some baseline to it, I understand that there are many traditions of medicine, but we got to protect people from people who are just trying to exploit it to make a profit.
Mike in Marshalltown, Iowa. You are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hey, thanks, guys. Mr. O'Connor, I had a question about my Part D insurance and how these insurance companies can regulate my Part D insurance, because I was getting two medications, and one of them was clopidogrel, and it was a medication I'd been taking for 4 years. Now it cost me $11, but I can get my medication now instead at the VA for $8, and I don't understand what these insurance companies are trying to do. Thank you for taking my call.
Well, look, I think these insurance companies are the biggest part of the problem in the medical system. I mean, the idea is that they are making all of these profits, and they are passing it down to people like you. And that's why we need Medicare for all, which isn't going to have these copays, which isn't going to have these deductibles, and everyone has to pay something for it. Bernie Sanders was very honest about that. Everyone, health care isn't free. Everyone will pay something into it, but it's going to be far, far, far less than you're paying right now for the drugs, for the copays, for the deductibles.
Mary in Las Vegas, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, Congressman. Is there any way they can make a change to the 401k where you can draw down a certain dollar amount so that you could put it down on your mortgage? To help pay your mortgage off faster or pay it off completely, because my interest rate's lower than low.
Yeah.
Marie, that's a great question. I mean, we earlier had a great question about could you extend the age if it's in a downturn market. I think your point is a good one too. I mean, if someone wants to be able to, for their first home, I mean, the home they're living in, want to pay that down, that's something we should look at. I'm happy to take a look at that.
And Louis Obispo, California. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna. And we have about a minute and a half.
Yes, Congressman. Okay, yes, Congressman. We all know the Biden administration has been weighing canceling student loans. And recently it was reported that they were concerned it would add to inflation. How about if we have a retroactive reset of the interest rate to 0% interest, which would, in effect, for many people, pay their loans off?
That's an idea worth looking at in terms of having zero interest, and a lot of what people have been paying has been the interest, and it would forgive a lot of it. The inflation argument I don't buy, because currently there's a suspension on the loan repayment. So it's not like suddenly you're going to have a large infusion of cash back to people. I mean, they currently aren't paying it, and the loan forgiveness is over many years. So it's not some massive stimulus into the economy.
Congressman, in our last 30 seconds here, what should we be looking for, and where would you suggest we focus our activist efforts in the coming weeks?
We've got to focus on climate. I mean, I'm concerned that we may, again, like the Obama years, not do anything on climate. And every year that passes is more urgent. And it's really heartbreaking to me that we haven't been able to get this deal, which would have been a massive investment. And then we've got to figure out what more we can do on lowering prices and having bold government action on the economy. I mean, I think that is going to be the defining issue as we head into the fall.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for dropping by, Congressman. It's always great having you.
I'm great. A lot of great ideas today. Enjoyed it.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. We'll be back with more of the program. Is America occupied by a dangerous Second Amendment scam? Is there a flood of evangelicals leaving the Reich? And what would you do if an election-denying Trump humper came to your doorstep and started pestering you about how you voted?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today is Jailbreak Out of History by Butch Lee. This is from the first chapter, Jailbreak Out of History, Harriet. Focus on Amazons, about why we deal with real women as myths, girls who never really existed. Yet and again, all are around us, and that we can't bring ourselves to see. Because seeing through white men's eyes is about non-vision of ourselves. So let's deal with a real Amazon. Think about Harriet Tubman. Take 6 months. In fact, take a year and think. Break it on down. What does it mean to be the most famous new African woman in U.S. history? What does it mean to be stuck in that lie? What's the meaning of being famous while being hidden and disfigured and dissed? Let's jailbreak Harriet Tubman out of white history and place her in Amazon and new African her story, her people's story. Harriet Tubman's life is a live weapon placed in our minds, showing us what it means to be an Amazon, which is why the capitalist patriarchy has forbidden us to touch on it for so long. In this, maybe for the first time, we can see Amazons as a future force in a clash of peoples and nations, not as myths, but as players in the whole difficult course of world politics. We can also appreciate the bittersweet tang of reality as the peeling away of layers of propaganda and disfigurement which have hidden Harriet from us exposes how much we assume and how little we have known. New African women have already pointed out the significant pattern of Harriet's exclusion. Cultural critic Bell Hooks said recently, I mean, if we could recover Ida B. Wells and Harriet Tubman to the extent that we've recovered, say, Zora Neale Hurston, I think that's an important contrast because people want to bury that revolutionary black female history. Historian Deborah Gray White connects Harriet's treatment to a larger pattern in the mainstream history of slavery, in which black women, quote, were reduced to insignificance and largely ignored, end quote. In examining the influential historian Stanley Elkins, she points out, quote, that Elkins seems to omit women altogether was accentuated by his description of slaves whom he identified as part of an American underground, those who never succumbed to Samboism. Among those mentioned were Gabriel, who led the revolt of 1820, Denmark Vesey, leading spirit of the 1822 plot at Charleston, and Nat Turner. An omission conspicuous by its absence was Harriet Tubman. If Elkins had really been thinking of slaves of both sexes, he would hardly have forgotten this woman, who became widely known as the Moses of her people." End of quote. Patriarchal capitalisms, which only want Amazons to be exotic myths about forgotten ages, have hidden Harriet Tubman in her own fame. They both trivialize and exceptionalize her. These are tools of oppressor culture. The stripped-down and censored version of her life is told in elementary schools all over the U.S. empire. So much so that everyone thinks they know her story already, although they don't. Harriet Tubman was born in slavery in Maryland around 1820. She escaped to the North when she was 29, but kept returning secretly to the South again and again to help other slaves escape. For this, she became known as Moses. True statements. But by limiting her, it becomes clever propaganda against her and against her people. Where patriarchy has been unable to deny that women do significant things, it denies the full meaning of what we do by trivializing them. Mary Daly, feminist philosopher, traces the enormity of what patriarchy has done to us. In ancient Greece, the goddess Hecate, also known as Artemis and Diana, was sometimes known as Trivia and represented by a three-faced statue. That was also the name used for the intersection of three paths, which in many old cultures were the sites of mystical power. She writes in Gynecology, quote, "In light of the cosmic significance of the term trivia as the crossing of the three roads, and of the goddess who bears this name, contemporary meaning of the term in English should be examined. The English term, which according to Merriam-Webster is derived from the Latin trivium or crossroads, is defined as common, ordinary, commonplace, of little worth or importance, insignificant, flimsy, minor, or slight. Of course, according to patriarchal values, that which is commonplace is of little worth. For in a competitive hierarchical society, scarcity is intrinsic to worth. Thus, gold is more important than fresh air, and consequently, we are forced to live in a world in which gold is easier to find than pure air." End quote. So to trivialize Harriet Tubman, the capitalist patriarchy pictures her as an idealized woman by their definition, who makes a life of helping others. Thus, her deeds are squeezed into women's assigned maternal role as nurturer, helper, and rescuer of men, who then go on to do important things. But Harriet wasn't repping Mother Teresa. She wasn't even any kind of civilian at all. She was a combatant, a guerrilla, a warrior carrying pistol and rifle, fighting in her people's long war for freedom, a war that rocked the foundations of African society, American society, and that has never gone away. Think about what it means to be called Moses, which was the code name other new Africans gave her, and which became Harriet's famous warrior name in the anti-slavery underground. When we check out the Bible, we can see that Moses was a ruthless visionary, someone who forced the boldest changes and risks upon his people so that they could survive, who led them out of captivity. To put it simply, Moses was a leader in a time of war. So too was Harriet Tubman. The book Jailbreak Out of History by Butch Lee.
And opined. But in France,
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. My op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled "America is Occupied by a Dangerous Second Amendment Scam." And that scam specifically is this idea which has been promulgated. It really started in the 1980s. The National Rifle Association and some of their buddies started promoting it. Now you've got people like, Texas Congressman Chip Roy just coming right out and saying it on the floor of the House, that the Second Amendment is in the Constitution because the founders intended that every American should have a gun, so if the government ever gets out of line and becomes tyrannical, they can shoot at politicians. Seriously. This is what they believe. And it's a complete lie. It's a complete scam. It is, shall we say, not true. In fact, what is true is the opposite. There are 5 different places in the Constitution where the Constitution puts any militia in America under the control of the federal government. There are two clauses in Article 1, Section 8. There's one in Article 3. There's one in Article 4. In multiple places in the Constitution, it comes right out and says militias must be under the control, essentially, of either the federal government or a state government. We have there was the Militia Act of 1792 that criminalized private militias. You see a bunch of guys with guns, strutting around in the streets in what appears to be some kind of military formation. That's illegal. That's illegal across the United States. In fact, and these guys claim that we've got to stop tyranny. The federal government right now is tyranny. What's the tyranny they're talking about? Raising taxes on really rich people, letting gay people get married, letting women have the choice of an abortion, making sure every American has health care or can get free college or trade school, and raising the minimum wage. This is a tyranny that's worth tearing down your government over. This is how weird it's gotten. And now, because this modern era of, this explosion of guns in America really started in 2008 with the election of Barack Obama. Putting a black man in the White House has produced, over the last 14 years, the same kind of blowback that we saw in 1886, when 1,500 black men took political office across the United States, most across the South. And the consequence of that was the end of Reconstruction. This huge white backlash and the rise of the Klan. Well, they don't call themselves the Klan anymore. They go by different names, but it's essentially the same thing. Armed militias. And they've got some really, really powerful weapons out there. AR-15s in Uvalde, one of those kids literally had his head blown off, decapitated by a single bullet. It'll blow a hole in your body large enough to put a fist through. And now, Sig Sauer has come out with a new weapon that can penetrate any kind of body armor sold, which is pretty bizarre. This is called the MCX Spear. This is going to be the new AR-15. But this militia movement, this really started out in the 90s as a fringe movement. In 92, you had Ruby Ridge, Randy Weaver. In 93, you had Waco with David Koresh. In 95, you had Tim McVeigh blowing up the Oklahoma Federal Building, killing 168 people, 19 of them children, and crippling or injuring more than 680 others. And then they kind of went quiet after that. After Tim McVeigh blew up the Federal Building and the tyranny didn't end. Everybody kind of, but the FBI started looking for people. They went underground until Obama was elected. I opened my book on the hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment with the story of going to a gun range in Mason, Michigan, Christmas Eve, or the week of Christmas in 2008. Obama had just been elected about 4 weeks earlier, and they were out of ammunition, or very, very low. They would only sell me one box of bullets. My brothers and I were going to do some competitive shooting on the range that they have there in Mason. And, I said, why? And the guy said, it's that N-word who just got elected to the White House. I mean, he didn't say it quite like that. You understand what I'm saying? And in fact, it was such a panic. There was such a panic around ammunition and weapons. There's a Wikipedia page for it. It happened in 2008. It happened again in 2012 when Obama got reelected. There was a second panic where you couldn't find weapons and ammunition. So what does the Constitution say about this? Article 1, Section 8 says that the Congress shall have the power to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the nation, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Well, what was January 6th if not an insurrection? It goes on to say the Congress shall have the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. Well, if the government is organizing it, it's not a private militia. If the government is arming it, it's not a private militia. If the government is disciplining, it's not a private militia. And then it goes on, Article 1, Section 8 goes on to say, reserving to the states respectively the appointments of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. In other words, the only militias that are legal in the United States are the military and the National Guard, the state militias. We had the Militia Act of 1792, as I mentioned. Then there was a Militia Act of 1903 that created the modern day, what we call the National Guard. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution guarantees us a Republican form of government when ordered by either the Congress or the President against domestic violence, another reference to this. Article 3, Section 3 defines treason. It's literally the only place in the Constitution where a crime is defined. And this is what it says. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Well, how is attacking the Capitol building not levying war against the United States government? War is the use of political violence to achieve political ends. And that was, in my mind, very clearly levying war against the government. So what do we do about this? Well, it turns out all 50 states have already made it illegal for these militias to exist, essentially, as has the Supreme Court. For example, the Virginia Constitution, which was written in 1776 with the assistance of James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, the Virginia Constitution, and George Washington, the Virginia Constitution says that a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. The standing armies in times of peace should be avoided as dangerous to liberty, and that in all cases the military should be under strict subordination to and governed by the civil power. In other words, if you want to walk around with a gun and cosplay being a revolutionary patriot or a Klan terrorist, you've got to operate under direction of the governor or the president. In this case, I was reading the Virginia Constitution. That would be under the state of Virginia. The only two states that don't, in their constitutions, outlaw private militias are Georgia and New York. 29 states have specific laws outlawing private militias. 25 states have laws that generally prohibit, this is a quote, generally from the Brown Center, generally prohibit teaching, demonstrating, instructing, training, and practicing in the use of firearms, explosives, or techniques capable of causing injury or death for use during or in furtherance of a civil disorder. And the Supreme Court in 1886, this is, when Morrison Remick Waite was the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. This is the same year we got corporate personhood, in theory anyway. 1886 in Presser v. Illinois. This is what the Supreme Court ruled, and I quote, "It cannot be successfully questioned that the state governments, unless restrained by their own constitutions, have the power to regulate or prohibit associations and meetings of the people, and have also the power to control and regulate the organization, drilling, and parading of military bodies and associations. The exercise of this power by the states is necessary to the public peace, safety, and good order. To deny that power would be to deny the right of the state to disperse assemblages organized for sedition and treason, and the right to suppress armed mobs bent on riot and rapine." Back in 1907, when the Klan was the main white supremacist militia, the state of Washington Supreme Court ruled, quote, "Armed bodies of men are a menace to the public. Their mere presence is fraught with danger, and the state has wisely reserved to itself the right to organize, maintain, and employ them." In other words, if you want to be in a militia, join the National Guard. As recently as 1982, a federal court in Texas disbanded the Texas Emergency Reserve. This is a private militia, used to be part of the Klan. They were harassing Vietnamese fishermen, and they were banned from, quote, "trading and parading in public with firearms." Yesterday, I told you about how 1 in 5 Americans now think violence is justified for political purposes, and roughly 18 million Americans, when asked, are you willing to kill another American to accomplish a political goal, say yes. This is the result of 40 years now of our being told that normal government functions are tyranny, that the founders and framers wanted average people to have guns so that they could shoot at cops and politicians. And I'm telling you, the proverbial chickens are coming home to roost. This is a dangerous time in America. We've got militias out there that are, threatening people who have testified against Trump, who are threatening people of color, who are protesting our queer brothers and sisters. And I mean, it's just, it goes on and on and on. The threat to liberty in the United States is now coming from people who claim to be acting on behalf of liberty in the United States, if that's not ironic enough for you. The states need to get this under control and start enforcing the laws that are already on the books. And frankly, we need to have an assault weapons ban. We need to do something about these new weapons. This new weapon that Sig Sauer has come out with that will kill any cop. It'll penetrate any bulletproof armor available in the United States right now. And they're going to be selling it into the civilian market next year.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
18 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. And welcome back. 18 minutes past the hour. And let's see here. Steve in Sebring, Florida. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. I had a story about Paul Manafort's father. He was the mayor of New Britain, Connecticut. From 68 to 72, he had a construction company, and he was a big grifter. While he was mayor, he made a secret deal with the president of Central Connecticut State College, which I went to back in late 60s and the 70s. And one morning, people came into the campus, the park, and they found out there were coin-operated toll gates, and it caused a big mess around college. Students protested. They tore down the gates. A big mess. The president said, well, if we didn't have the toll gates, we'd have to charge you more for your parking sticker. And they stopped traffic around the college. And Paul Manafort came out in his suit, and somebody said, there's Manafort now. And he says, and one person said, hey, what kind of kickback deal have you got going with the college? And then somebody yelled out from the crowd, and he says, oh, don't confuse Manafort with a fax. And now, a couple years ago, they made a street sign for his father, Paul Manafort Drive or something next to the college. And there's a black woman came to the town council in New Britain and said, hey, that ain't right. But she did it because of his son. And I'm saying it's not just because of that; it's because he was a grifter too. Yeah. And they rechanged the street, named after a Central Connecticut State alumni, a black man who was the first ambassador for the United States.
Amazing!
What a story!
Amazing. It reminds me of Jared Kushner. You know, his dad was convicted of being a grifter, went to prison for being a grifter, and now his son's a grifter who just extracted $2 billion from Saudi Arabia.
And who convicted him? You know who convicted him? The ex-governor of New Jersey convicted him. That's why he couldn't get into Trump's, orbit to get a job with Trump organization in
Kushner
Washington.
Sr. you're talking about, or?
Yeah, Kushner Sr. was convicted by that governor. You know the ex-governor. It's on ABC.
I don't know who you're talking about. I believe you, who it was, but I don't know. I don't know his name.
Oh, you don't know?
I'm sorry. Apparently you don't either.
The next governor of New Jersey. Did I say Tennessee, New Jersey?
No, you said New Jersey. I just don't know. You know, I don't know the governors of. Are you talking about Chris Christie?
Oh, Chris Christie. He got Kushner.
Oh, that's
convicted.
right. You're right.
Yeah.
He was the federal prosecutor who put Kushner's dad in prison. And you're absolutely right. And that's why when Kushner got into the White House, he prevented Chris Christie, because Chris Christie was in line to be chief of staff.
Right. Yeah.
And Mark Meadows
right.
got the job instead. Oh yeah.
And that's why Christie said he never convicted an innocent man. That's what he said.
Yeah, well,
on TV.
He may well have been right. Steve, thanks a lot for the call. That was fascinating. I had no idea that Paul Manafort was also a multi-generational grifter. And now you've got, Donnie Trump Jr., by the way, who was involved in a housing scam in the second year of the Trump administration. He created a company to sell, instant housing, and it turned out it was a scam. It's amazing, these guys, these grifters. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. A couple of quick stories that I wanted to share with you I think are pretty important. Turns out that the spokesman for the Secret Service, who's been saying, oh, no, it was all routine. We just, we deleted those messages, but we didn't know. This guy was the same guy who was the top spokesman for the Chicago Police Department when Laquan McDonald was murdered by the police department. And he's the guy who came out and said, no, we don't have any audio of his murder. This is when the cops were calling him racist names. We don't have any audio because of software issues or operator error. And then we later learned that they had just hidden that audio. This is the same guy who's telling us now that the Secret Service can't tell us what the text messages were. And his boss, or former boss, current boss, the Inspector General, who is overseeing the Secret Service, was a Trump appointee who has covered up previous Secret Service scandals. This thing is really starting to stink. Another story that I think is really, really consequential that I wanted to share with you. A 2016 survey by Wheaton College estimated that 90 to 100 million Americans identify as evangelicals. 80% in 2016, 80% of the white evangelicals supported Donald Trump, which is just breathtaking. Now, back in the 70s, the white evangelicals were not a political group. That happened with the Reagan administration when they brought George W. Bush in to create this liaison and Jerry Falwell and Ralph Reed and all those guys, because it was evangelicals who helped put Jimmy Carter in the White House, because he himself was an evangelical. Well, it looks like, and back then it was the Moral Majority, the Christian Coalition, Focus on the Family, and all these groups. It's looking like now there is a substantial exodus out of the evangelical church. 23% of Americans, of white Americans, were evangelical Protestants in 2006. By 2020, the number of white evangelicals is down to 14.5%. And following Trump's election in 2016, the hashtag exvangelical became very popular. This, by the way, is from a piece over at Common Dreams. A potential historic political shift is taking place among evangelical Christians. Mega churches from Seattle to Illinois to Alabama and beyond have seen resignations of pastors around sexual misconduct or infidelity. You had the huge sex abuse scandal in the Southern Baptist Convention. After the 2016 election, when white evangelicals supported Trump, quote, by a larger margin than they had voted for any other presidential candidate, churches began to resegregate. And a couple of prominent black evangelicals, Chicago pastor Charlie Dates and Atlanta's John Onwuchekwa, both left the Southern Baptist Convention due to concerns about racism within that organization. So it seems that maybe the evangelical church, there's this movement, the Surge movement, for example, out of Phoenix. It's a renewal movement co-founded by a guy named Tim Keller. They mobilized white evangelicals to march in the Black Lives Matter protests of the murder of George Floyd. He had 3,000 people from 200 churches join a march in Phoenix, where the ministers led a public prayer, and then a deacon in one of the churches read the names of people killed by police. So good news, I suppose, particularly for Christians out there, is that the evangelical movement may be rediscovering the actual ideas of Jesus. What a novel idea. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break right after I tell you about this story of Trump humpers going door to door and trying to intimidate voters in Colorado. Stick around. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Common Sense for the 21st Century by Roger Hallam. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse. This is from the foreword. I was there for the past 20 years. Climate activism. It didn't work. We protested in our hundreds of millions. It didn't work. We raised billions to reach people and politicians. It didn't work. We signed countless online petitions. They didn't work. We looked to the United Nations to resolve the crisis. It didn't work. We trusted progressive politicians and their reforms. That didn't work. Al Gore had a big concert and a PR campaign. It didn't work. Countless NGOs, non-governmental organizations, did their best, and it didn't work. I worked with green NGO campaigns, champagne environmentalists, and lying politicians. I was wasting my time. I had a clue back in 2007 that there might be a fundamental flaw with the reformist approach. The problem with the political influence of the industrial billionaires like the Koch brothers and other fossil fuel bosses. It was another warm night in Los Angeles. I was invited to an exclusive event. A Tesla Roadster prototype was going to be shown to press and guests. We took turns riding around the block. I watched in amazement as the Tesla was at the end of the street in the blink of an eye, with barely a sound. I felt like a caveman seeing a television. Incredible. While I was working on a campaign in 2007, I had an idea for how to save the world with a massive music event and a huge fundraising effort led by celebrities to fund the biggest PR campaign to save the environment. It would be a huge global event, just like Live Aid. I sought out a prominent journalist at the Tesla event to tell about my scheme and bask in the glory of his praise. The journalist was Vijay Vithswaram from The Economist, now a life member of this Council on Foreign Relations. After listening carefully to my concept, he smiled and laughed. I was stunned. Laughter? How could I be so wrong? Vijay wasn't being cruel or unkind. He thought I was naive. He said, the fossil fuel industry has enough money to outspend any public relations campaign you might try by 100 times. He carried on talking, but I had stopped listening. I had my answer. He was right. Crestfallen, I sheepishly nodded and walked away. Over the next 12 years, I watched as fossil fuel companies used their vast financial capital to buy political parties, trick NGOs into fruitless schemes like the U.S. Cap and Trade Initiative, sow doubt about climate science in the public discourse, and slow policy reform to a snail's pace. Their strategy worked. As climate skepticism continued to spread, climate change mitigation dropped down voters' priorities. With Trump and Putin in power, it was over. I quit climate campaigning. Then I heard about Extinction Rebellion closing 5 bridges in London. Then they closed central London in April 2019. This was something different. I met Roger Hallam, and he explained his ideas for a radical plan to create real change. This included, first, tell the truth. Climate skepticism was pushed by the mainstream media, which spread doubt on climate science like a plague, leaving inaction in its wake. The scale of the crisis is being played down, and we must get the truth out. Second, nonviolent civil disobedience. We need to get arrested, tens of thousands of us, more. No more protests, no more petitions. Instead, Nonviolent civil disobedience, lots of it, and on a large scale. Close down cities until the politicians take action, or until the people do. Third, universalism. In other words, the ecological and climate crisis should not be owned by any political ideology, culture, age, or gender. As Roger Hallam says, we all have a stake in the future. We should all be allowed to engage in action. I was convinced we need a new approach to save ourselves and the planet. We need to spark a worldwide rebellion. We need some common sense for the 21st century. That foreword was written by, quote, anonymous climate activist. So this now is the introduction to the book. It is time to grow up and see the world as it is. There are some things which are undeniably real. There are some things we cannot change, and one of those is the law of physics. Ice melts when the temperature increases. Crops die in a drought. Trees burn in forest fires. Because these things are real, we can also be certain about what the future holds. We are now heading into a period of extreme ecological collapse. Whether or not this leads to the extinction of the human species largely depends on whether revolutionary changes happen within our societies within the next decade. This is not a matter of ideology, but of simple math and physics. The United Nations has estimated that we need to reduce carbon emissions by half within a decade to have a 50% chance of avoiding a global catastrophe. Of course, this is likely to be an underestimate, as recent science shows permafrost melting 90 years earlier than forecasted, and Himalayan glaciers melting twice as fast as expected. The book, Common Sense for the 21st Century, by Roger Hallam, the co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So Mother Jones Magazine got a hold of some leaked audio that was taken of Steve Bannon. He was talking with a group of people on October 31st, 2020. That's in the days prior to the election. Now, at this point, everybody in America who was paying serious attention knew that Trump was going to lose this election. The polls were showing this. I mean, he lost by 7 million votes. You can't bury that. You can't hide that. That's a freight train coming down the road at you. He knew he was going to lose. Bannon knew he was going to lose. And Bannon tells this crowd that Trump is going to declare victory on election night because he knows that a lot of the Democrats didn't want to show up in person at the polls because of COVID, and so they mailed in their ballots. Republicans weren't so concerned, and Trump is going to be ahead. And he's predicting exactly what's going to happen, which raises the question, how well planned was this? It really looks like there's a conspiracy. You can check it out. There's a whole video about it at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. So, reporting, this is happening in multiple states now. We've got reports from New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado. Trump humpers going door to door and demanding to know who you voted for and how many times you voted and whether you're one of those fraudulent Democrats and whatnot. Michelle Garcia, Pueblo, Colorado, this is Travis Geddes, by the way, reporting this over at Raw Story, told NPR that 2 men knocked on her door last fall. At first, she thought they were canvassing for a political candidate. Then they told her, we're doing a voter verification project, and said, did you vote by mail? How many times have you voted? He wanted to know who I voted for, who I supported, et cetera, said Michelle. She said she told the men that she never had any problems, did not wish to discuss her personal voting record, but that did not stop them from peppering her with questions. She said there were no boundaries with their ethics or civility. They will push until you give an answer. They are very intimidating. In deeply conservative Mesa County in Arizona, 3 women showed up at Annie Landman's door last summer with questions about the 2020 election. Same deal. Did your husband vote in the last election? Yes, he did. Who did he vote for? You know, these groups, this is the Colorado County Clerks Association, the former GOP County Clerk Matt Crane. He is the executive director of the Colorado County Clerks Association. He is a Republican. He says, quote, "These groups claim to be election integrity groups, and nothing could be farther from the truth. They are undermining public confidence in our elections with no proof of anything." And I would add, they are intimidating voters. And they're going to the homes of people who are registered as Democrats because your voter registration is a matter of public record. Wait till they start showing up with guns. 37 minutes past the hour. Let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Robert in Grayslake, Illinois. Hey, Robert, it says you disagree with me. What's on your mind?
Tom, it's regarding the Second Amendment. Now, I want to sort of make clear, I'm a leftist. I'm on the same side you are.
Doesn't matter.
However,
if you want to disagree with me, you're disagreeing with me.
Yeah, I still disagree with you. Every time I hear people talk about the Second Amendment, they make the same fatal mistake. There are two clauses in the Second Amendment that describe two groups of people. The first one is militia, and by reference, it points to it throughout the Constitution. There's a comma after that, and then the phrase, the right of the people, which is the second group, shall not be infringed. That is exactly the interpretation that the Supreme Court is resting on, and it's exactly the argument that the right wing will seize on if any attempt by the government is made to restrict or somehow outlaw assault rifles.
I know this is you're essentially arguing the Heller argument. I think it's BS. If you simply go back and read the debates in Congress when the Second Amendment was hammered out, you will know that it's BS. But Scalia didn't want to do that. But you're right. This is the law right now.
Yes. No. I'm saying the reading of the Second Amendment actually supports it supports the legal conclusion. The parole evidence is what you're describing. These debates are irrelevant. It doesn't matter what the debates were. What was written down, the black letter law identifies two groups. There's the militia, which is already talked about in the Constitution, and there's the comma, and it identifies.
Well, if they wanted to separate those, Robert, they would have used a period, not a comma. And I'll just leave it at that. We're going to have to agree to disagree on this. Brian in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say it this morning. It's always bugged me when people are saying, like, oh, I need my guns in case the government gets too oppressive. And I always push back with, you're not going to have enough guns if the government wants to.
Well, and beyond that, what is so oppressive about gay marriage, taxes on billionaires, free college for people, better health care, lower drug prices? I mean, please tell me what is oppressive here.
100% agree, obviously. But what I wanted to point to in that regards is Sri Lanka, what just happened. The only thing that's going to determine whether people can take back their government is the willingness of the party in power when they get enough pushback to resign or not. If they don't want to resign, it doesn't matter how many guns I'm sitting on in my house. If the army wants to come to my house, and even if I have a few cosplay buddies, they're gonna win. The army, the government. Mm-hmm. If the sovereign won't leave power, which they just did in Sri Lanka, and I don't think the people were heavily armed. I don't think they were armed.
No, they were not.
All, but
they were not armed. Yeah. And because they have gun control in Sri Lanka, but they did force the government out, and that's the point. You can political power is political power, and when held in the mass, and that government in Sri Lanka was extraordinarily corrupt, and they knew it. Which is I think why they turned tail and ran. But your point is well taken, Brian. Thank you very much. Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I think I was listening to you yesterday, and you mentioned that stripping Senator Joe Manchin from his committee assignments would be a good idea. However, wouldn't that give the Republicans a majority on the Senate?
Yes, it would.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be worse?
Well, this is, I'm not saying we should do this. I'm saying I'm no longer afraid of doing this. And there's a difference, but, B, the guy who got me going down this road was Robert Reich. And his point was that we're in 10 weeks or so, we're going to go to the American people, the Democrats are going to go to the American people and say, reelect us. Keep us in power in the Senate specifically. And And the American people, many of them, particularly low information voters, which is more than half of America, frankly, they're going to say, wait a minute, you've got the Senate, you got the House, you got the White House, you didn't do squat. Why should we put you back in power? So if we were to strip Joe Manchin of his committee assignments, and I would probably toss Kyrsten Sinema into that too, but if we were to strip him of his committee assignments and he was to do what the guy who followed him as governor of West Virginia, Jim Justice, did. Jim Justice was elected as a Democrat to the governorship, and then, when Trump was elected in 2016, Jim Justice flipped to becoming a Republican. He's still the governor of West Virginia, I believe. If Joe Manchin did that and flipped to becoming a Republican, yes, we would lose control of the Senate. Then our pitch in November to the American people is, give us the Senate and we'll show you what we can do. Rather than, we've already got the Senate, but we really just need a little more of it. And Robert Reich, who's no dummy, I mean, he worked in the White House all those years as Clinton's labor secretary, says that he thinks that would be a stronger argument. I can't dispute that. I'm not saying that it should be done, but I'm saying I'm no longer afraid of holding Joe Manchin to account.
Yeah, I agree with that view, and I think Robert Reich is a very respectable guy. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome, Alfredo. Thank you for the call. Randall in Oklahoma City. Hey, Randall, what's on your mind today?
Well, I know a lot about these militias because 168 dead Oklahomans, and the government knew these militia movements were going, and whatever, and the guy that did it was in the Army in the Gulf
Tim McVeigh.
War.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had killed people. He was a machine gunner on a Bradley tank. Anyway, that stuff is deadly, and I knew a guy that died there. Anyway, that's. But after that, they kind of went away because the government said, "Boy, this is a problem." You know how you close the barn door after the horse gets out? Well, they went after and it didn't really make the news. They knew how to keep it out of the news because that would.
Well, that also helped lead to the assault weapons ban in 1995, I think it was, that Bill Clinton got that passed, 94 or 95.
Yeah, and they lost the House or the Senate or something. I don't remember it. They paid a price for it in the.
That was the Gingrich Revolution.
Yeah, the Gingrich
96
contract on America.
Yeah,
for America, on America. Anyway, I'm just telling you, this stuff is serious, and these people are serious, and. Oh, this new Army rifle, it's called New Generation. It's an $8,000 rifle.
I know.
So not very many people get it. Hey, keep up the great work. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Randall. Thank you. And thanks for the testimony from Oklahoma. Appreciate it. It's 44 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls on the other side of this break. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, talk media for the sane among us. Yes, we are still here.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
If you had been living under a rock, by the way, President Biden, the news is that President Biden tested positive for COVID, but he has very mild symptoms, which is good news. And welcome back. Bill in Sun City, Arizona. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
I had to get you a speaker. Tom, the first three words of the Constitution are, we the people. The 12th and the 13th words are established justice. And I think that's where the trouble lies.
How so?
We failed to establish justice.
Well,
we really have.
We created a court system.
We haven't established justice. We've established an unjust court system, an unjust government. Where's the justice in Citizens United? We've let it go. There has to be more discussion on what is just and what is unjust.
That's a good point.
There has to be a lot more discussion. Tom, you have to discuss it. I understand that since World War II, the right side has captured the message. That is, 5 corporations own all the information going outward. I understand that. And it pains me. We have to establish justice.
So any suggestions on how to do that, Bill, other than repealing Citizens United?
examining all of our laws. Where is the justice in our laws? When they propose laws, tell me where it's just.
Yeah.
I want more discussion on justice. I want to live in a just democracy, not just a democracy.
I get it. I totally get it. Bill, thank you. Excellent point. Well made. Jared in Abbeville, Louisiana. Hey, Jared, what's up?
Hey, afternoon. Hey, I heard you talking about a SIG firearm that's supposed to penetrate body armor. Do you remember what caliber that was in?
I don't. It doesn't use 223. I think it's. Well, I don't want to give you a number and be wrong. You'd have to look it up. It's easy to find. I mean, it's
okay. I'll look it up.
You can Google it.
Can I ask you another question real quick?
Sure.
Do you know if a 501c3 organization has to disclose where they get their donations from?
Yes, 501c3s do. Yeah, 501c4s. I'm not sure. There's a whole bunch of categories, brand new categories. The super PACs don't operate under either of those. They've been created under another piece of the tax code that says the consequence of the Citizens United decision. And there are certain types that don't have to disclose anything at all. So it varies. It depends on which part of the IRS code that they chose to incorporate under. Okay.
Because I saw a new commercial and I was reading a thing that they have anonymous donors going to their 501c3. But thank you for taking my call.
Well, the way that you do that, the way that they do that is they'll run the donation through an organization that doesn't require the donations to be registered, and then that organization will give to the 501c3. There's one of the really, really large Republican dark money machines. I think it's called the National Policy Council. I could be wrong. This is an area where, Jane Mayer's book, Dark Money, is just a brilliant analysis of this. But basically, they are a dark money group, and they bring in all this money, and then they give it to not just PACs and campaigns, but also to 501c3s that support the kind of work that they're doing. So, Jared, thanks for the call.
All right, thanks, sir.
Yep, good talking to you. We'll be right back. It is 49 minutes past the hour. Stick around. We'll be back with you, picking up your phone calls on the other side of this break. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Jeff in Durham, North Carolina. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I would like for you to explain something to me, sir.
Okay.
Who in the world would let Donald Trump run for president again? Can you tell me? Explain this to me.
Well, he's got a little cult following. I don't think there's any chance, literally any chance at all, that Donald Trump is going to be president again. None. But the question is, how much damage is he going to do to the GOP in the process of trying to get there, or at least trying to maintain the legal immunity that comes with either being president or being a candidate for president. He appears to be operating under the mistaken impression that if he declares his candidacy, then Merrick Garland can't investigate him. And Merrick Garland disabused him of that notion yesterday afternoon. And so, we'll see how this shakes out.
Yeah, he already got control of the Republicans already. He already got them in his pocket already.
Yeah. Well, he's got the majority of the Republican Party behind him. Ron DeSantis is creeping up on him, and in some states, Ron DeSantis is beating him, although nationwide, it's still Trump 50-some-odd% and DeSantis around, in the 20s or low 30s. So DeSantis is going to give him a run for his money, and it's going to be real interesting, and also to see what kind of effect, what kind of damage it does to the GOP. It continues to do. I mean, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, this is because of Trump. Herschel Walker down in Georgia, because of Trump. Manifestly unqualified candidates who are probably going to go down in flames, knock wood. So we'll see. Jeff, thank you for the call. Valerie in San Diego. Hey, Valerie, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I hope you can't hear the machine over by me. Anyway,
I hear you just fine.
I'm calling about the woman who's calling about her sister on SSI.
Okay.
And sorry, I'm a little out of breath.
It's okay.
The same thing happened to me. I am aware of the 2000, but they overpaid me. And so then they wanted to take all of it back. All $80 a month for a year that they took from me. And I said, I can't live on less than I have. And so they said, oh, well, you can make payments. Ding, ding, ding. I said, okay, well, how much? And they said, well, how much do you want to pay? And I said, $1 per month. And she says, that's ridiculous. And I said, well, then you give me a suggestion. She says, $10. I said, deal.
Wow.
So have her sister call with her and fight it.
Right.
Don't let them get away with any kind of whatever shenanigans they might want to try to pull over on you.
Right.
Because her sister probably didn't know to do that, of course. So yeah, fight it.
I'll bet that $2,000. I'll bet anything that $2,000 limit was put into the law or into the Social Security regulations back when I remember in the 70s buying a house and putting a $2,000 or maybe it was $3,000 down payment on it. That was big money back then. I mean, you'd add another zero to see what $2,000 is worth. Was worth back in the 70s or 80s. It was worth $20,000. They really need to update that law.
Yes, and on top of that, when I got onto Social SSI, it was $885 a month, and they told me they hadn't raised it in 20 years.
Yeah, this is nuts.
I'm getting a little bit more because I'm in California, and California is slowly raising it. Look, you do another $15 a month. But I have to be careful. Oh, when I first got on it, I was teaching an art student for, $300 a month, and they were going to give me, if I did that, $65 of that.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah,
So,
this is just unfair and it needs to be fixed. Valerie, thank you. Thank you very much for the advice for our caller earlier too. Marie in Atlanta. Hey, Marie, what's on your mind today?
Hey there. Thanks for taking my call, Tom.
Sure.
Quick point. The AJC reported probably about a week ago that the Secretary of State's office was going to be mailing out letters to voters they believe have moved.
In other words, black people.
Well, yeah, you and I both know how that's going to work, but, the article didn't go there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't disclose what basis the belief of someone having moved was. So I did want to put out there for your listeners who are in Georgia, if you get such a letter, please respond, because if you don't respond, in essence, you will have, in their eyes, given them a reasonable basis to believe that you actually did move.
That's correct. And this is what the Supreme Court legalized in 2018 after Ohio got busted doing this. And they were specifically sending them into black communities. And the Supreme Court said, oh, that's all good. If you have, reasonable doubt that these people still live where they live, send them a letter. And if the letter doesn't come back, then bounce them off the voting rolls. So this is called caging. There used to be, there used to be a law against this. Karl Rove had, the Republican Party operated for almost 30 years under a restraining order, a federal court restraining order to prevent them from doing exactly this. And now the Supreme Court, 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court said, oh yeah, no, it's fine, it's cool. If you want to throw people off the voting rolls, go for it. Here we are.
Exactly.
Yeah, Marie.
Can I bring up one last point?
You certainly may.
I'll be quick. I noticed also that the head of Secret Service is going to be retiring and moving on to a role at Snapchat, which is an application that, if I recall correctly, makes it possible for a message once viewed to disappear. I would wonder, and I would hope that Merrick Garland is going to have FBI investigate whether or not any of those Secret Service members were exchanging messages using Snapchat.
I think they all need to be fired.
An odd thing.
I think it is time to do a damn house cleaning here. These people were told twice to preserve their messages, and they deleted them. They should be fired. And the guy who is the spokesman for the Secret Service, he's the guy who was the spokesman for the Chicago police who lied about the Laquan McDonald thing. Now he's the spokesman for the Secret Service. And the Inspector General for the Department of Homeland Security is a Trump appointee, and this is the 3rd time he's tried to cover up of malfeasance within the Secret Service. Trump corrupted the Secret Service. When he took the #2 guy in the Secret Service and made him his assistant chief of staff in the White House, the guy left the Secret Service to become a political appointee, and now he's back in the Secret Service in charge of training. Tony Ornato. I mean, this organization, police organizations are so vulnerable to corruption to begin with, and this organization has been so clearly corrupted by Donald Trump and the right-wing politicos. There needs to be a purge. Marie, thank you. Thank you very much for the information. I appreciate that. And if you're down in Georgia, as Marie said, look out. Those letters are coming. And, you know, Raffensperger, keep in mind, Stacey Abrams lost the last election for governor by 50,000 votes after Raffensperger had purged over 100,000 people from the voting rolls. This time he's probably going to purge 200,000.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We take fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Common Sense for the 21st Century by Roger Hallam. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse. This is from the foreword. I was there for the past 20 years. Climate activism. It didn't work. We protested in our hundreds of millions. It didn't work. We raised billions to reach people and politicians. It didn't work. We signed countless online petitions. They didn't work. We looked to the United Nations to resolve the crisis. It didn't work. We trusted progressive politicians and their reforms. That didn't work. Al Gore had a big concert and a PR campaign. It didn't work. Countless NGOs, non-governmental organizations, did their best, and it didn't work. I worked with green NGO campaigns, champagne environmentalists, and lying politicians. I was wasting my time. I had a clue back in 2007 that there might be a fundamental flaw with the reformist approach. The problem with the political influence of the industrial billionaires like the Koch brothers and other fossil fuel bosses. It was another warm night in Los Angeles. I was invited to an exclusive event. A Tesla Roadster prototype was going to be shown to press and guests. We took turns riding around the block. I watched in amazement as the Tesla was at the end of the street in the blink of an eye, with barely a sound. I felt like a caveman seeing a television. Incredible. While I was working on a campaign in 2007, I had an idea for how to save the world with a massive music event and a huge fundraising effort led by celebrities to fund the biggest PR campaign to save the environment. It would be a huge global event, just like Live Aid. I sought out a prominent journalist at the Tesla event to tell about my scheme and bask in the glory of his praise. The journalist was Vijay Vithswaram from The Economist, now a life member of this Council on Foreign Relations. After listening carefully to my concept, he smiled and laughed. I was stunned. Laughter? How could I be so wrong? Vijay wasn't being cruel or unkind. He thought I was naive. He said, the fossil fuel industry has enough money to outspend any public relations campaign you might try by 100 times. He carried on talking, but I had stopped listening. I had my answer. He was right. Crestfallen, I sheepishly nodded and walked away. Over the next 12 years, I watched as fossil fuel companies used their vast financial capital to buy political parties, trick NGOs into fruitless schemes like the U.S. Cap and Trade Initiative, sow doubt about climate science in the public discourse, and slow policy reform to a snail's pace. Their strategy worked. As climate skepticism continued to spread, climate change mitigation dropped down voters' priorities. With Trump and Putin in power, it was over. I quit climate campaigning. Then I heard about Extinction Rebellion closing 5 bridges in London. Then they closed central London in April 2019. This was something different. I met Roger Hallam and he explained his ideas for a radical plan to create real change. This included, first, tell the truth. Climate skepticism was pushed by the mainstream media, which spread doubt on climate science like a plague, leaving inaction in its wake. The scale of the crisis is being played down, and we must get the truth out. Second, nonviolent civil disobedience. We need to get arrested, tens of thousands of us, more. No more protests, no more petitions. Instead, nonviolent civil disobedience, lots of it, and on a large scale. Close down cities until the politicians take action, or until the people do. Third, universalism. In other words, the ecological and climate crisis should not be owned by any political ideology, culture, age, or gender. As Roger Hallam says, we all have a stake in the future. We should all be allowed to engage in action. I was convinced. We need a new approach to save ourselves and the planet. We need to spark a worldwide rebellion. We need some common sense for the 21st century. That foreword was written by, quote, anonymous climate activist. So this now is the introduction to the book. It is time to grow up and see the world as it is. There are some things which are undeniably real. There are some things we cannot change, and one of those is the law of physics. Ice melts when the temperature increases. Crops die in a drought. Trees burn in forest fires. Because these things are real, we can also be certain about what the future holds. We are now heading into a period of extreme ecological collapse. Whether or not this leads to the extinction of the human species largely depends on whether revolutionary changes happen within our societies within the next decade. This is not a matter of ideology, but of simple math and physics. The United Nations has estimated that we need to reduce carbon emissions by half within a decade to have a 50% chance of avoiding a global catastrophe. Of course, this is likely to be an underestimate, as recent science shows permafrost melting 90 years earlier than forecasted, and Himalayan glaciers melting twice as fast as expected. The book, Common Sense for the 21st Century, by Roger Hallam, the co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse.
Pathways at all. About preventing or remedying bad outcomes. The book, The Inner Level, by Wilkinson and Pickett.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. On the line with us is Amanda Milkovits. Amanda is the Rhode Island reporter with the Boston Globe, bostonglobe.com, and the author of this fascinating news story, The Growing Signs of White Nationalist Recruitment. extremism in Rhode Island and across New England, actually. Amanda, welcome to the program. What got you started on this particular beat, on this particular story?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
Sure.
So we've just been noticing, actually, for over the last 2 years, the appearance of Oath Keepers, 3%ers, Proud Boys showing up at various marches. And it appeared to accelerate over the last couple of months. A local group, actually a local New England group called the Nationalist Social Club, showed up outside. It's called the Red Ink Library. It's kind of a private community library on the east side of Providence, and they were reading the Communist Manifesto, and this group showed up with Nazi flags and pounding on the windows. We've seen a lot of literature being dropped across the state. So, and particularly over the 4th of July holiday, and that appears to reflect what's happening nationally. The Anti-Defamation League has noticed since 2020 and through this March a 340% increase in propaganda drops and various leafleting and banner drops and all types of media from different types of white nationalist groups.
What is their main sales pitch?
Well, they're looking for, as at least the NSC says, like-minded white men to join them to, quote, take their country back, to reclaim America. It's actually even a password that they've used on some of their chats. They are very, the NSC is a neo-Nazi organization, although they try to present as a little more normal. They are anti-Semitic, they are anti-racist, they are very pro-Christian, white, patriarchal. And, the same goes for the Patriot Front, which marched with the NSC through Boston over the 4th of July weekend, and the Graham Defense League, which also showed up here in New England as well.
So basically their sales pitch is, we're white people, we're supreme, we're the destined rulers of America. Let's band together and keep the black people out and keep women in their place, essentially.
Yes, they're looking for people who are unhappy with the various changes in the social order, whether it's there's gay marriage or women's rights or trans people, and it's just people who are unhappy with it, who feel uncomfortable. They're trying to appeal to them, and also really the propaganda is being used to put everybody else on notice that they exist.
Right.
The caveat is they're not big groups. The Anti-Defamation League told me that they believe, like the Nationalist Social Club, which is based in New England, kind of an offshoot of the Patriot Front, which is national, is only about maybe 40 to 50 members. And you can cover a lot of ground if you drive around the car and throw leaflets out the window, basically, and make people think that you're bigger than you are.
In 1868, in that election, there was a substantial uptick. This is following the Civil War, a substantial uptick in black representation in the South. By 1876, there were 1,500 black men who had been elected to elected offices across the South, including, as I recall, 18 members of the U.S. House, 1 member of the U.S. Senate, over 300 members of state legislatures in southern states. And this produced this enormous white backlash that gave us the modern-day Klan, and that led to the Great Compromise of 1877 that ended Reconstruction, the Tilden Hayes election. And the whole idea of black people voting and participating in normal American life just went underground until the 1960s. It seems to me that this really started with the election of Barack Obama, a similar event, a black man in high political position in the face of white supremacists. And in 2008, because before 2008, I mean, the militia movement and the white supremacist movement, they had Tim McVeigh back in the day and Randy Weaver and, David Koresh, but they were considered fringe crackpots and nobody wanted to wave the flag saying, yeah, this is me. But ever since Obama was elected, I mean, we had the Tea Party explosion, we had all this stuff. Is that a reasonable assumption that a lot of this is, over the last 14 years, it can be traced right back to that?
I think that, that's a great question for extremist researchers, but I think it's a very astute observation. What I would add to that is look at social media. Look at the way it is so much easier for groups to mobilize, to create flash mobs, which is what these white nationalist organizations are doing. They're all showing up together at once and surprising the quote normies as they call everyone else. And really, they can stay in touch. You can mobilize a national organization much easier than you could, way back in the day.
Right.
You can create propaganda, not just banners and stickers and things like that, but they actually have their own photographers. They look and see who has photo skills, who has video skills, and then they create their propaganda videos to show how tough they are. Some of the outtakes, the Unicorn Riot, that's an activist organization, and they've leaked a lot of information from, for example, Patriot Front and NSC. And some of the outtakes are really hilarious. You see a lot of the fails, the stickers that don't work, the graffiti that doesn't stay on. They don't know how to spray paint. There was a Patriot Front was doing a hike through Mount Agamenticus in Maine. And if you know that place, it shouldn't take you more than 20 minutes to hike it, but they were marching through like they were going into the deep woods. And but they can put it together in a very slick video and impress people. So I think that's something to be considered too. It's how they're mobilizing. I mean, also, one thing that the Anti-Defamation League told me, and the Southern Poverty Law Center said, we have politicians in high places and people high places who are actually leading this. The white replacement theory,
right? Tucker Carlson
is. Right. It's becoming much more mainstream, and this is really what's promoting these groups.
Yeah. Well, and this raises the kind of corollary question. If white backlash in the 1860s and 1870s actually succeeded in suppressing the rights of minorities for the following roughly 100 years, and clearly that's the goal of these people, do you think that there's any chance that they can pull it off now? I mean, back then, people of color were a very measurable small minority of Americans. I mean, we had immigration laws that had racial quotas right up until 1965. But now, today, the 5-year-olds going into kindergarten, 50% of them are not white. I mean, is there any chance these guys can have any kind of, legislative or social success in ways that, or is this just noise around the fringe that's going to get a lot of people hurt and cause a lot of pain, but in the end, it's going to be full of sound and fury, signifying nothing?
Well, I mean, can it be both? I mean, I think that there is a lot of noise and fury, and I think that there are also people who are making legislative advances. I mean, look at a lot of the local races and the issues that are being brought up at the school boards and the town councils and the city councils.
And the voter
you look
suppression.
At what's happening and the voter suppression. And January 6th was a great example. I mean, there are people there who were showing up because they were mobilized for the president, and there were people there who with intent and purpose. At least that's what's being shown in the January 6th committee hearings. So, but the world is different than it was in the 1800s. I mean, there's an expectation now that we are a multiracial society, that this is not tolerated. It is causing a lot of concern, on the Jewish population, black people. A lot of people I've spoken to said, what does this mean? And everybody wants to know, well, who are they? Because when they appear, they're all masked. And, that's, of course, the purpose. They don't want to be seen.
It's like the hoods for the Klan.
It's like the hoods for the Klan, sure. But it reminds me a lot of street gangs. I mean, I covered a crime for about 20 years, and a lot of the methods they're employing are the same methods I saw from the local street gangs.
Well,
when you cover up, you wear your colors, you have your neighborhoods, you cover up other people's graffiti.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And to that point of violence, again, if you look at the sale of guns in the United States and the number of guns on the streets in the United States.
Sure.
Those numbers only were gradually increasing up until 2008. In 2008, it went up so explosively. There's actually a Wikipedia page for the great ammunition shortage of 2008. In 2008 and 2012, after Obama was elected both times, you couldn't buy ammunition. I mean, the prices were out of sight, and now we've gotten, just since 2008, we've gotten over 20 million assault weapons on the AR-15 style weapons on the streets.
Sure.
So there's a lot more lethality out there. Do these groups reflect that lethality? Are they a clear threat to life?
That's what the ADL believes. They are very concerned, and they look at that. Is this a precursor to violence?
Yeah.
We can talk about 2008, but we really should be talking about 2020. We can talk about the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's really when the lockdowns happened, that's when people were going out and buying weapons. People were buying weapons for the very first time because they were afraid. They didn't know what was happening. I mean, in my little state of Rhode Island, we have very strong gun laws. It's not really a gun carrying culture, although it is, in the western part of the state. That changed in 2020. It was an enormous uptick and a huge percentage rise. And I think they led the country actually in percentage rise of background checks.
Fascinating. One of America's great reporters, Amanda Milkovits, Rhode Island reporter for the Boston Globe, bostonglobe.com. Amanda Milkovits, Milkovits on Twitter. Check out this work. Amanda, thanks so much for dropping by and sharing the result of your work with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 17 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls on the other side of this break. A lot to talk about here. What do you think is going to happen tonight? This is going to get interesting. And welcome back. I don't recall. I'm pretty sure I have not shared this story with you. My apologies if I had. It's a couple days old, but I think it's worth paying attention to. Trump's strategy of claiming that if he wins an election, it was good. In other words, the election was done properly and everything was copacetic. But if he loses the election, then there was clearly fraud, has been adopted by Jair Bolsonaro down in Brazil. And now, this probably didn't, in fact, I'm quite sure, did not originate with Donald Trump. In fact, Donald Trump was saying back in 2000, when Trump was first talking about running for president, he said, if I win, it's a fair election. If I don't, it was fraud. I mean, he just came right out and said it, like, this is my plan, right? So Bolsonaro invited the diplomatic corps, this was a week ago Monday, into the presidential palace and to rant at them about how Brazil's election system was, quote, open to fraud. There's an election in October. Bolsonaro's up for re-election, and he's not doing well in the polls. Lula, who was the president of Brazil for a number of years, a socialist, a lefty, and who ran the country pretty well, although big money from the United States and in particular came down to Brazil and helped Bolsonaro get into office. Bolsonaro replaced him, but Lula and Bolsonaro then threw Lula in jail for a year and a half, as I recall. And now Lula is running for re-election, as is Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro currently holds the office, and Bolsonaro is coming out and just going on these rants about how, it's the election system is rife with fraud. He's specifically going after voting machines and saying that the voting machines, you can't trust them, quack, quack, quack. And the easy thing about that, or the lazy thing about that, I guess, the Trump-Bolsonaro lazy thing about that, is that if you're going to come up with a conspiracy, and you have to say, well, okay, it's coming out of this particular congressional district, or it's coming out of this particular town, and this guy is running it, and we know that these people are doing whatever, fill in the blanks, however they're jerry-rigging the election. You have to show some proof. You have to have evidence. But with computers, which is essentially what voting machines are, it's very easy to say, well, you can't see inside that machine. You can't see electrons flowing around inside a voting machine. You have no idea what's going on with the voting machine. So, it's an easy target, essentially. And I think this is why Trump, you'll recall, Michael Flynn advised Donald Trump to have the military seize the voting machines in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona. Have the U.S. Army do this. So Bolsonaro is now talking about this. There was a diplomat from the United States who was there, the EU, France, Spain, and Portugal. And this is all about, as I said, the October 2nd election. And the opposition leaders are saying, wait a minute, he is fixing to lose the election, claim fraud, and then stay in office to pull off what Donald Trump just tried. And I think they're absolutely right. Keep an eye on what's going on in Brazil, because this is a bellwether for what's happening in democracies all around the world. We'll be right back. Pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Welcome back. I will be picking up your calls in just a moment. I just want to share a quick story with you. This is our geeky science for the day. Remember monarch butterflies? If you're of a certain age, you probably do. I remember, my childhood in Michigan. You knew it was spring when the monarch butterflies arrived from Mexico. They were all over the place. Of course, we lived on the edge. We lived in a brand new suburb that was built right in the middle of farmland all around us. And so there was milkweed all over the place. But I just remember monarch butterflies always, everywhere. I haven't seen a monarch butterfly in years. And this new study, it just came out today. It was just published. Stuart Pym at Duke University said this is a devastating decline. This came from the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And they have now listed the monarch butterfly, put it on their red list of threatened species and listed it as endangered. That's just 2 steps from extinct. They said that the North American population of monarch butterflies just over the last 10 years has declined as much as 10%. This is just another tragedy of nature. I mean, we can see what's going on, and it's just heartbreaking. So, picking up your phone calls here, Joe in Chicago. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Basically, this is just for a friend who was concerned that did the Supreme Court judges, which were probably all Republican, take into consideration that girl is forced to have the baby, and she's of a really young age, say 10, 12, 15. There's going to be a responsibility of cost for that baby, for food, clothing, cost, doctor checkups, and so forth. And if there is, where's it going to come from? She's guessing that there's going to be higher tax for the lower income, the 1% up to the middle class, and that tax is going to be used, most of it, to clothe, feed, and have these babies checked up, educated, what have you.
So in other words, if the state is going to force a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old to carry a baby to term, but that 12 or 15-year-old, the state will not allow them to enter the workplace, and of course, as a society, we wouldn't want them to. We'd want them to be in school, but then there's a logical disconnect there. That's what you're pointing out, Joe. Do I have that right?
Yeah, exactly. And say she doesn't have a lot of family or any family.
Yeah.
Like a homeless child or something.
Yeah.
How she
or a foster kid.
How she can't hold the baby. So all of a sudden now the baby's going to be,
Well, this is what's called ward of the state.
Right.
Yeah. This is where you get into the whole ward of the state area. Yeah, it's an excellent point, Joe. It's an excellent point, and it just again shows the irrationality of one size fits all solutions. Let's just make abortions illegal. Period. And sorry, it just doesn't work.
Just make it easy.
Yeah, Joe, your phone is, I can't understand you. Being on speakerphone like that, it's just gone. So let's go to Addie, and thanks for the call, Joe. Let's go to Addie in Lamont, Illinois. Hey, Addie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I disagree with you about messing with the Senate and Joe Manchin right now. Nothing should jeopardize our judges that we can get through before the election, and all these votes that can be taken about contraception and gay marriage and things like that. We need to put the Republicans on the record. Mitch McConnell would not put any of these to vote. And
You're absolutely right. That's an excellent point, Addie. You just changed my mind.
Yes, and then the other
Thank you.
I'm glad. The other thing is that when you had Khanna on, and that man, the first caller, talked about all the good things Joe Biden did, there's so many things we could do to promote what he's done well and how we are moving ahead. Can you provide a clip of that to somebody to run an ad? Because I thought that was so good, the way that man just...
Yeah, he did a good job. Certainly Nate can put it up on YouTube, and then anybody could use it any way they want. It was a good call.
I think it was great because so many good things were done.
And I've seen some good summaries recently of the things that have actually been accomplished by the Biden administration, and they're substantial, and there's a large number of them. We went through a list on this program maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was a huge list.
Right.
So, yeah.
Glad I changed your mind.
I'll check it out. Addie, thank you. Thank you, and thanks for changing my mind. I appreciate it. It's good talking to you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So much for my deeply held convictions. Like I said, I wasn't advocating it. Robert Reich is making me think. Anyhow, we'll pick up your calls after the break. Give us a shout.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at ThomHartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Jessica Valenti publishes a newsletter called All in Her Head over at Substack.com, and just has an amazing compilation of bizarre Republican statements about rape and abortion. Michigan Governor Garrett Soldano earlier this year said that there should be no exceptions for rape in the abortion laws because the next fetus might be the next president. Missouri State Representative Barry Hovis said that most sexual assaults are actually consensual rapes. Texas Republican Representative Michael Burgess says that we should ban abortion because if you watch a sonogram, they have movements that are purposeful. If they're a male baby, they have their hand between their legs. They feel pleasure. That's right. Women should be legally banned from getting an abortion so that their male fetuses can masturbate, writes Jessica Valenti. It's absolutely bizarre. Idaho Republican Vito Barberi says you can do a gynecological exam by swallowing a camera. What planet do these people live on? A whole list of them is on a video over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. Just a quick note here, ProPublica. Their big story today, they just published it. The state of Florida has now helped 10 ex-felons register to vote, and now they are threatening to put them all in jail. His last night as a prisoner in North Florida, Kelvin Boughton couldn't sleep. 55 years old with a wispy goatee, the same color as the gray flecks in his hair. He was about to get out after serving a 2.5-year sentence for theft and battery. The last time he'd seen his brothers and sisters was at a big family gathering. Now Bolton was so close to being free. The next morning, a bright Wednesday, he was already dressed in his street clothes and cleared to go when the woman processing his paperwork stopped him. The lady said, "Hold on, you can't go anywhere." Confused, he asked her what was going on. She said there was a warrant out for his arrest for incidents in 2020. But that was impossible, he said. He'd been in jail at the time, awaiting his prison stint. Guards put him in a van, drove him an hour and a half to another jail. There he found out what he'd done wrong. He had voted. In 2018, voters overwhelmingly passed Amendment 4 in this ballot initiative, which said that ex-felons could vote. And there were a bunch of ex-felons who then, because they thought, hey, it's the law, who then registered to vote. And it turns out that DeSantis got this thing flipped around. This is an amazing story. I'm going to do a deeper dive on this tomorrow. This is mind-boggling. Anyhow, 36 minutes past the hour. Let's pick up some of your phone calls. What's on your mind? What are you expecting for tonight? What did you think of Garland's announcement? I found it incredibly reassuring yesterday. President Biden now has COVID. I'm going to be hopping on an airplane in a week and a half to go to my brother's memorial service in Michigan. And it seems to me that everybody is just now going, yeah, I'm going to get COVID. I heard on NPR this morning there's 800,000 cases a day, brand new cases of COVID. It's like, is there going to be anybody left who hasn't had it? So far, I haven't. But I'm very skeptical that I will be able to make this trip and come back without getting it. And, Nancy Pelosi got it. She's like, what, 80? Seems to do fine with it. Are we thinking now of COVID as the flu? Have we reached that point with this BA5? Maybe. On the other hand, the Oregonian yesterday, our local newspaper, had a front page story about how the hospitals are surging again with COVID. And it's the BA5, and it's putting people in the hospital. There's like over 400 people in the hospital just here in Portland. Now, my guess is most of those people are not vaccinated, or maybe just one vaccine and they never, did the whole series and didn't get boosted. I don't know. But, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? What are your thoughts on this? Have you had COVID? Do you feel immune? Are you back to normal? We took one of our daughters to dinner last night, a little restaurant nearby, but they have outdoor seating. So we sat outside. We're still not taking chances. How about you? Anyhow, I'll pick up your calls here. James in Lakewood, Washington. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I just off the top, I've noticed one monarch butterfly. One.
In how long?
On one of my trees. Anyway, in establishing justice, someone had talked about that earlier, and I thought I'd bring it up that with Louis DeJoy and the Postal Service, are those people sworn to an oath?
I am guessing that anybody who takes an office that requires, well, I was going to say Senate confirmation, but his doesn't. He's appointed by the Postal Board of Governors. I don't know, James. I'm not sure.
I wonder if those people, the managers in the offices that took the machines out and destroyed the public property, are sworn to the Constitution or sworn to.
I doubt it.
An oath.
Although I just don't know. I mean, the post office was turned into, this was the stage one in privatizing the post office. I believe it was in the Reagan years. I might be wrong, but it was separated. It was made no longer a government agency. Now it's a kind of a part government agency, and it's like a hybrid. They did the same thing with Amtrak, and so I don't know how that works. Frankly, it's beyond my knowledge.
Yeah, okay. I was happy to see that monarch butterfly fluttered around here. It still comes in.
That's good. So you're getting them in Washington State. Yeah, just one.
Well, I've only seen one.
Yeah. I haven't seen one in probably a decade, but occasionally I'll see. Go ahead.
It's so hot across this country right now that I don't even know if they can live. They move up north to get away from the heat, don't they, in the summertime?
Yeah, that's right. They come up here and lay their eggs and become caterpillars, and I don't know if they've formed chrysalises yet or not, or whatever. But yeah, this heat cannot be good. It's got to have a disruptive effect on basic ecosystems, including insects. James, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Ron in San Francisco. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Well, with the thoughts about the birds and the bees, as it were, and we were talking about butterflies,
I'm talking about what goes into our bodies. The butterflies are affected by a man-made process of herbicides and insecticides and industry waste.
And species law and habitat loss.
And that's the whole thing is man-made, one. Yeah. But my concern is because I've been working with students for over 50 years under global garden projects, and they focused on the new report that came out with a lawsuit that occurred against the company, with the Mars company, for their product of, was it Skittles? I think.
Right, the titanium dioxide. People are, the people suing them are saying, that's not good for you. And Europe just put it on their banned list last year. We have not. It's GRAS here, generally regarded as safe by the FDA, or the USDA.
Well, that's curious. Now, you said FDA. FDA...
No, it's the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's not the FDA. My apologies.
Okay, but FDA, I looked at FDA, and they gave a sanction for it back in 1966. And they have no current reports, supposedly, of the effects on humans in regards to the carcinogen, the cancer.
Right.
Though they have reports that in mice it causes cancer. So where are we? Where's the development of this with all the products out there and the use out there? Now, the Mars company does not use it in its M&M products.
Anymore, yeah.
Anymore, right, which is interesting.
I'm guessing they'll pull it out of Skittles. They had said that they were going to pull it out of Skittles by this year or next. I'm guessing that this lawsuit will speed it up. But what's the point, Ron?
Well, my point is we have an industry that produces products which contain known carcinogens at low levels, but they don't focus on the bioaccumulation, which they say there is a process here. That bioaccumulation in building up the negative product, the poisonous product,
right.
What is the effect in the long term on the person who may have a triggering of a cancer or other disease because of the buildup of...
Yeah, I don't know. What I do know is that titanium dioxide is used all over the place. It's used as a whitening agent in cosmetics. It's used as a whitening agent for candies and foods. I mean, this
bakery goods.
Bakery goods, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's all over the place. And the assumption's always been that titanium is an inert metal, basically. It doesn't oxidize quickly. It doesn't react. It's not a catalyst typically. It's very, very strong. It's used to strengthen steel. And in fact, you can get titanium joints. You can get titanium hip replacements now. But, whether it's more biologically active when it's the oxide form, I don't have any idea. This is something
sir, the bottom to me, and thinking with students, is we have all these products. When can we turn that around where we can eliminate the toxins in the products?
Yeah, well, I would like us to start. And I really think we should be pursuing the precautionary principle like they do in Europe, where you have to prove that something is safe before you bring it to market. Here in the United States, you can bring something to market. There's over 80,000 chemicals in our environment right now, in our food supply and in the clothes that we wear and the things that we breathe and deodorants and everything. 80,000 chemicals that have never been tested for toxicity. In Europe, you've got to test them before you can sell them. That's called the precautionary principle, and we should adopt it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
But, of course, the American chemical industry, which spreads big money around in Congress, does not want that to happen. We'll be back with your calls. And welcome back. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's up? What's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call, and I wish you in advance safe travels. And, it's too bad more people are masking up. The CDC's recommending it here in Oregon indoors. So if we did that, I think we'd be a lot better off. But, I wanted to start by referring back to Ro Khanna's opening statements today, where he's talking about the CHIPS bill. Mm-hmm. Common Dreams has done a really good job covering the progress of that. And as Representative Khanna alluded to, he didn't specifically say, but Bernie has a proposed amendment to that would ban stock buybacks and the offshoring of jobs, as well as prevent union busting for any companies that benefit from that legislation. So, otherwise it's a bill that would give away anywhere from $52 to $76 billion in corporate welfare to an industry already highly profitable.
Yeah.
So I urge people to call their senators to tell them to support Bernie's amendment to the CHIPS bill.
I'm with you.
Or CHIPS Act. And on the subject of workers, Tom, Brian Stryker in the New York Times and Stephen Greenhouse in The Guardian both have pieces this week about how the Democratic Party needs to step up its game in drawing the distinction between us and the do-nothing Republicans when it comes to being pro-worker and union pro-union. And we know how virulently anti-union the GOP is. So there's never been a better time to expose them for being like that. With the rising worker movement in this country. So. I think we need to add to the pro-worker voices in the Democratic Party, and we need to keep the ones we have. And Andy Levin, who has done a couple town halls, progressive town halls on your show, he's running a tough primary next month in Michigan, by the way, where you say you're going to be visiting. And, he needs all the support we can give him because he's running against a centrist Democrat. It's a redistricted district. So you have two people that are already in Congress running against each other, two Democrats. But Andy is the progressive and the pro-worker one, and he's getting big money thrown against him. So, I don't know if you've been following that.
I have not, but thank you for flagging that for me. I appreciate it, Jeff. Andy Levin, Andy did do it. He's been on twice. He's done 2 progressive town hall meetings. Maybe we should invite him back and see if he wants to come on.
Yeah.
What do you know about his opponent? Is it a what's his name here?
Her name's Haley Stevens. She's a Democrat, but she's one of those problem solver centrist types, and
like Schrader.
Yeah, exactly. And she's getting tons of money from special interests. He's getting outspent, but with grassroots support and hopefully getting the word out to progressives nationwide, we can get him to win it.
There you go, Andy Levin. Jeff, thank you. Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for the heads up on that. I do appreciate it. It's 48 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back in about 60 seconds. On the other side of my reading an ad for HelloFresh today. So I'll be right back after telling people about good food. Stick around. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. The Economic Policy Institute just came out with a great summary of what's causing inflation and what are the myths about inflation. They go through the 5 major myths, the lies. Number 1, that workers' wage growth is driving inflation. Actually, workers' wage growth is going up more slowly than inflation. It's holding inflation back. Myth number 2, that corporate profits are not the cause of inflation. Actually, more than half of the inflation that we're experiencing right now can be tracked directly to corporations ripping us off. Myth number 3, federal relief and recovery measures overheated the economy and caused inflation. If you look over the last 40 years, you see that that's very much not the case. You might be able to build a case for the Fed feeding it, but probably not. Myth number 4, removing import tariffs would be a major tool to fight inflation. Not so much. And myth number 5, investing in child care and elder care would accelerate it. Nope, not the case. There's a whole video about this over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back, 10 minutes before the hour, and picking up your calls here. Mike in Baltimore, Maryland. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call, and thanks for everything you do.
My pleasure, Mike. If you can get your mouth a little closer to the microphone, it'll be a lot easier to hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's much better. You don't have to take it off speaker. Just put it up against your mouth. So,
okay.
Go.
Okay, great. I have to push back on people that keep saying that we should not get rid of Joe Manchin. The reason being is no one can name me one major policy legislation that the president has put forth that Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema has not tanked. So therefore, he's not helping us. If we're going to gamble on spending money to fund right-wing conspiracy theorists in our primaries, we should take the gamble on letting him go for the next month or a couple of days, or a couple of weeks or whatever, because Mitch McConnell isn't going to do nothing anyway. He's not helping the Democratic Party. Joe Manchin needs to go. He is not a Democrat. He said it himself. I am not a liberal. If you want this stuff passed, elect more liberals.
Yeah,
Joe
he
Manchin
did say that.
needs to go.
He did say that. At least he's right up front about it. I get what you're saying, Mike. I'm forgetting her name now. The caller earlier. Her point was the judges, and that had not. That's when the penny dropped for me. I am hopeful that Chuck Schumer will cancel the summer vacation. I don't see any evidence that that's going to happen, but I think he should cancel the summer vacation and like McConnell did.
McConnell would do exactly.
McConnell did it actually.
Right, but the problem with that is they're not allowing the judges to get through anyway. Look at all the blue slips that they're still holding on to.
Well, and that's the other thing. I mean, if Schumer had any spine, he would do the exact same thing Mitch McConnell did, which is ignore the blue slip rule.
I agree, 100%. But you got more people to go through. But again, thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Mike.
And letting me get my voice out. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to talk to you. Thank you. David in Canterbury, Connecticut. Hey, David, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I got some good news for you.
Okay.
On the Monarch butterfly thing. And here in Canterbury, Connecticut, I have a small farm, and my wife and I grow food here, and we've devoted part of our land to growing milkweed. And I actually farm it. And Tom, you should come to my farm and it's a sight to behold. They're everywhere. And they're beautiful and they're free, and milkweed is the key. And anybody out there that's listening to me, if you have a neighbor that has some milkweed, go dig up a few plants, put them in your yard. You're correct, Tom, when you say that habitat destruction is the key to their demise, and it is. Yeah. I think the 10% over the last 10 years may be a little low, but habitat destruction is a really bad problem. But we have amazingly big pile of monarchs here in Canterbury, Connecticut, and they're great to look at.
So you got all our monarchs, David.
They're also pollinators, Tom. And
yeah, I know.
I've just moved in 10 beehives from a guy that does beekeeping, and not as a conservation product, but as an agricultural product. Because sometimes they clash, because pollinators. You got to be careful with honeybees because they could X out native pollinators. So I mean, this guy is really up on his bees. He explained it all to me, and we're doing our best, Tom, to take your advice. That despair is not an option. We're old, but we're still active. And get yourself some milkweed, put it in your yard. Madison Avenue wants you to have a nice green mowed lawn. Forget that. Start growing food. Get some milkweed out there, mow around it. It's better to have food and have monarchs than it is to have a pretty lawn.
Yeah,
and we have to move away from that kind of thinking, Tom. Food is key. Food is key. So I just want to let you know, Tom.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
And
that's
Addie's
great.
call, if I could. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's right on. I agree with you that you've changed your mind, her and Joe Manchin. As an old union guy, I had two things that my guiding philosophies was. One was the greatest good for the greatest many, and the second one was we can always disagree on strategy, but never on principle. When we could disagree the hell out of Manchin, but we still have our principles, and part of those principles right now are justice and freedom and getting judges on the court, and that's a big, big thing, Tom.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
Thanks
David,
for
thank
listening
you.
to me.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you. Bob in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind?
So I just wanted to offer maybe some suggestions that maybe for your trip for your brother's memorial, that is not inevitable that you're going to get sick. Right. That something that I've been using has been is basically sauna and cold, because it helps your innate and your specific
crank your immune system.
You crank your immune system. The other thing is, of course, I know you're probably wearing an N95 all the way.
Yeah.
Just assuming everybody is a prospective carrier, and I think the biggest risk is probably not so much the plane, but going to be the people in the airport itself.
Yeah.
And then boosting your immune system by just going in overload for that for the next week or so.
Yeah, one of our neighbors went on a trip and came back with COVID, and you know, I said, where do you think you got it? And he said, I think we got it at the food court because we took our masks off to eat. And if I had to do it again, I would not eat in an airport because, you know, the air is all trapped in the airport and millions of people go through there, and it's probably a COVID farm. So I'm going to eat before I get to the airport. Outside. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, but typically airports don't have outdoor eating, but yeah, excellent point. So have you avoided COVID so far, Bob?
I think so. I have to because I also have a family member who's going through cancer treatment right now.
Yeah. Well, I've got a 92-year-old mother-in-law too, and you know, who's in great health, but you know, I don't want to be bringing COVID to the family. Bob, thank you for the call, and thanks for the well wishes and the positive suggestions. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Anything Goes Friday. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. That includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you, and stay safe, eh? See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit ThomHartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
There you go.
Woof, woof. Okay. Whoop, I just got a text message from Jefferson. Hang on. Do you need that mask now? Question mark. Presumably not. Nah, never mind. He texted me at 4 minutes after noon asking if I had an extra mask, and I didn't catch the text message. I don't know why, but my text messages don't bling, you know? Okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'll go grab one and give it to him.
I got one of these, too.
And you got a KN95?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's some in Nate's area. Excuse me. Mole man. Oh, we're getting low. We got to order some more. There's only 2 left. Yeah, we've only got 1 left now. Okay, Nate, let me know when you're recording. Okay. Hey, thanks again for supporting our program. Back a couple of years ago, the Met Office, the British Weather Service, spent quite a considerable amount of effort and time and computer resources to modeling what the climate might look like in the year 2050. That is 30 years out. And they came up with a model. They presented it on television, in fact, 2 years ago in 2020. And they said that, basically you could expect temperatures around 100 degrees Fahrenheit all across the United Kingdom. In fact, they produced a nice little graphic about it. Well, yesterday, they just tweeted this actually. Yesterday, they had those temperatures. Those temperatures that they were predicting for 2050, they happened yesterday, 28 years early. Just thought you might want to know. This thing is moving a heck of a lot faster than any of us expected. And it's catching scientists by surprise. It's obviously catching meteorologists and the entire government of the UK by surprise. We all need to be paying attention to this climate crisis. Thanks again for supporting our program. You're recording? Over at the Met Office, the British Meteorological Service, the weather forecasting service for the country of Great Britain, back a couple of years ago, they spent a year trying to putting data into the massive computer and trying to figure out, okay, what's the climate going to be like 30 years from now in 2050? What's the climate going to be like? And what their computers came up with was that, in London, it might be 39 degrees Celsius. It might be, roughly 100 degrees, 102 degrees Fahrenheit in 2050, 30 years out. And they went on TV and they made that prediction. Now, they just tweeted out a comparison, a graphic from this week versus their prediction for 2050, and they now have the 2050 temperatures. There's a whole video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Boston Globe piece, or can I easily Google it?
It's on the link sheet for tomorrow.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's an opinion piece as opposed to a news story, but
Well, I'm not seeing it. You need to save your work, because I'm seeing that you're in there editing the page. You could just save and continue. There we go. Thank you.
yay!
You're negative?
Yeah.
Very good.
I brought presents.
Oh, too sweet. Wow.
These are really yummy.
What are they?
They're coconut, coconut lime bars.
Thank you.
My wife made
Wow.
them. Very well.
Wowie zowie.
Very nice.
All right.
Very nice.
What's new?
Thank you.
How are things with you? How was the last two? It's been a long time. It feels like yesterday, but it's actually been like a long time.
I know, it's been like 3 years, that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
2.5, but anyway, all good. I see you on Facebook once in a while.
Once in a while.
Your house looks good.
Yeah, that's the beach place. The thing about this place is great.
Cleaned up nice.
I didn't do it before. I should have before and after of the Portland place. That was a huge project, and now it's great. We just did a fundraiser for a pro-democracy candidate in Southern Oregon, and we raised $20,000 yesterday.
Very good.
It's a big push.
So here's what we've done that's different from when you were here last.
More books.
More books. They're continual. It's like a flood.
Except for during the last 2 years of COVID when they preferred to send PDFs than actual hard
Right,
copies.
right. Probably because they had nobody in the office to send them. Yeah. Is that we're using a wireless system,
Oh, great.
and it's battery operated. And in fact, I'll break it down and put it back together for you and show you how it works. So when you're off the air,